Maybe you know Rahab's name from church or saw her listed in the family tree of Jesus. But do we really know her whole story? We will trace her path, starting with her infamous trade on the walls and following it all the way to her risky choice to shelter Joshua's spies, watching her go from an outcast to earning her rightful place as one of just 5 women in the ancestry of Jesus. As this story ends, you will see why her journey remains one of the most powerful stories of survival and grace in Scripture. But first, if you are joining us for the first time, consider subscribing and liking to help us share these ancient tales. Your presence here helps us bring these histories to life, offering a quiet space to learn and unwind. Also, let us know where you are listening from tonight. We want to build a warm community of people who share a love for these deep historical journeys. Now, take a breath, settle in, and let us begin our journey. Picture ancient Jericho rising from the dust like a massive crown of baked clay and stone. The early morning sun stretches long, dark shadows across the massive fortifications. For centuries, these ramparts have stood watch over the Jordan Valley in heavy silence. Outside, life moves with farmers and traders, priests and guard patrols, all living out their quiet lives under the cold eyes of their local gods. But today feels different. There is a strange heavy weight riding on the dry desert breeze. High above the streets, on a flat rooftop facing east, stands a lone woman. Her name is Rahab. Her life is about to echo down through the centuries. She looks out toward the dry horizon, watching pale dust clouds drift in the heat. This is no ordinary dawn. It is the quiet beginning of a storm that will shatter kingdoms. Her fingers press against the sun-warmed stone of her windowsill. A bright red cord hangs from the frame, swaying softly in the draft, catching the early light like a thin line of embers. She has no idea how this cheap piece of rope will bind her fate to the survival of an entire nation. Down below, Jericho begins to wake. Market sellers shout their prices. Kids chase each other through the dusty, cramped alleyways, while the rhythmic clang of a blacksmith hammer rings out from his dark shop. To anyone watching, it looks like just another routine day. But underneath the noise, fear is building like water behind an old clay wall. Whispers have raced through the streets like a brush fire. The Hebrew tribes are on the march after 40 years in the dry wastes, finally nearing their promised home. These are no longer bedtime stories. Real reports are coming in from desert merchants who have seen the massive camps from scouts tracking their march, and from panicked families fleeing ahead of the host. Rahab has listened to every word. She caught the quiet gossip in the market, the nervous talk by the main gate, the debates among the priests near the temple steps. The God of these wanderers does the impossible. He tore a path straight through the sea. He fed them in the barren wastes. He crushed great kings before them. Up on her roof, Rahab feels a cold shiver at the news, but beneath the citywide panic, a different feeling stirs inside her. It could be curiosity. It could be hope. Or maybe it is a quiet longing she cannot yet name. This wilderness god is nothing like the dead stone idols in her own town temples. This god lives. He acts. He protects his flock. As the morning wears on, Rahab watches the familiar motions of her city, but she can feel the nervous energy underneath. Guards walk the ramparts more often, sellers keep their voices low, mothers pull their children back from the streets. The shadow of the Hebrew camp has fallen over Jericho long before their boots touch the soil. The sun climbs higher, painting the mud brick walls in a warm, amber glow. Rahab's own home is built right into this defensive wall, with rooms hollowed out of the very stone protecting the town. It is a good spot for her business, keeping her clients out of sight while staying easy to reach. But today, this home sits right on the border of 2 different worlds. To the west lies everything she has ever known. The noisy shrines of Baal and Asherah, the crowded market stalls she worked for years, and neighbors who tolerated her. But to the east lies only the empty, terrifying unknown, a wasteland hiding an army unlike anything history has ever seen. Living her kind of life, Rahab has learned to read people, mapping their fears and dark desires. She sees the same dread on every face. Right now, wealthy merchants walk with white knuckles and tight lips, terrified for their caravan routes. Guards pale as they stare over the battlements, knowing stone might not save them. The poor just look blankly ahead, having nowhere left to run. But she notices other things too. Even in the grip of panic, tiny moments of quiet kindness break through. A bread seller slips an extra loaf to a starving child. A young woman helps a fragile widow carry her heavy water jar. A father whispers stories to ease his boy's fear. Even with doom at the gates, people find ways to care. As the sun burns hot overhead, Rahab steps away from her window. But the sights linger in her mind. The dust on the horizon, the nervous eyes, the heavy tide of change about to sweep her world away. She does not know it yet, but two strangers are walking toward her gates right now, holding the key to her survival. And that is where our story truly begins. Rahab stands at the edge, between two worlds. Behind her lies a hard life on the margins built entirely on survival and grit. Ahead lies a future she can barely imagine, where her choices will echo down through generations. Here, her quiet faith will be remembered long after the walls of Jericho crumble to dust. Meanwhile, that scarlet cord still sways in the window. It is a quiet sign of hope. A storm is coming. Soon, everything changes. Jericho, the legendary unconquerable city. The great city rises from the dry sands like a monument to human pride. Its massive stone walls reach straight toward the sky. Built up in layers over hundreds of years, the towering inner walls rise far above the outer ones, creating a double shield that has never been broken. This fearsome defense gave Jericho its name as the city no one could take, a fortress that seems to mock anyone who dares try. Those ancient builders knew their craft. Truly, they built with massive, heavy stones. Every block was fitted tightly against the next. The outer wall stands 30 feet high and 20 feet thick. Behind it, the inner wall towers even higher. This massive defense system almost laughs at the idea of an enemy siege. Between these double walls, small houses cluster like birds in a nest. The people literally live inside the defensive walls. Yet, Jericho is more than just cold stone. It is the crown jewel of Canaanite culture, guarding the vital crossings of the Jordan River and serving as a bustling crossroads for ancient trade. Traders from Egypt bring gold and rich spices through the heavy gates, while merchants from Damascus carry precious metals and beautiful woven textiles. The wealth of kingdoms flows through these dusty streets like a deep river. From sunrise to sunset, the marketplace hums with relentless, noisy energy. Sellers call out in half a dozen different tongues, their voices blending into a loud chorus. The smell of roasted meat mingles with sweet, exotic spices. Small children weave through the crowded stalls, their laughter blending with the loud bargaining of their parents. Beneath the surface chaos, the whole market operates with the easy, natural rhythm of a system built over centuries. Right in the center of town sits the great temple of Baal and Asher. These silent gods have watched over Jericho for age after age. Their stone eyes gaze down at the rich sacrifices left in their honor. Priests perform old rituals with steady hands, their chanting echoing off the high walls. The locals believe these deities keep them safe, that divine favor shields their town. But deep beneath this outward confidence, the first cracks are starting to show. The king of Jericho has just ordered extra guards onto the ramparts. His scouts are returning from the eastern wilderness with deeply unsettling news. They are no distant threat now. The Hebrews have actually crossed the Jordan River. You can see their campfires from the highest guard towers. What once seemed impossible is happening. Every single day brings tense, urgent updates to the city gates. Runners bring word of fortified towns falling easily to this new army. Places once thought perfectly safe now lie in black ash. Even the strong people of Gibeon chose to surrender rather than fight and die. Each sore sends cold shivers of fear through the crowded streets of Jericho. The king's palace sits on the highest hill in town, its towers looking out across the entire valley. From up there, the ruler and his advisors can see the rising dust clouds of the Hebrew camp. At night, they can easily count the fires lighting up the dark wilderness. They can watch the terrifying shadow creep closer to their stone walls day by day. Inside the cities, generals gather in tense, quiet meetings. They talk of battle plans and heavy shields of the height of their walls and the courage of their men. Yet there is a new sharp worry in their voices. This God does the impossible. He delivers victory where triumph seemed like a dream. He has even turned nature itself into a weapon for his people. Down in the streets among the ordinary citizens, fear spreads fast, like ripples on a dark pond. Mothers whisper prayers to small household idols. Fathers lock and double-check their wooden doors. Children pick up on the fear in their parents' voices, even when the words are meant to soothe. The city that once felt completely safe now feels like a trap waiting to snap shut. Yet life goes on. The bakers still bake their bread, potters still mold their clay, merchants still count out their copper coins. Somehow the human spirit adapts to even the heaviest uncertainty, finding a way to press on, even when tomorrow is hidden in darkness. Neighbors huddle along street corners, sharing whispers and news, trying to comfort one another. The spiritual weight in the air is getting heavier. Priests double their sacrifices, desperate to win back their God's favor. Terrified families bring their finest treasures to the temple, begging for help from the very gods who once kept them safe. But the cold stone faces of Baal and Asher offer nothing but silence, leaving the city's desperate questions completely unanswered. When evening falls, the great walls of Jericho look as massive as ever. The sentries take up their posts, spears reflecting the flickering torchlight. The heavy gates swing shut with a loud, solid thud, sealed for the night. But tonight is different. Tonight, these stone walls feel less like a shield and more like the bars of a dark prison. The unconquerable city tosses and turns, haunted by dreams of a coming storm. Tomorrow will bring fresh fears and tough questions, but for tonight, the ramparts still hold, and the people try to believe they are safe. In the shadows between the inner and outer walls, in a small house built right into the stone, a woman named Rahab lies awake. She listens closely to the sounds of her city falling asleep, the faint cries of the night watch and the wind sighing through the ancient stones. She does not know it yet, but her path is about to cross forces that will reshape the world. The impenetrable city waits for the dawn, totally unaware that its ultimate test is drawing near with the morning sun. This was Rahab's life before the Hebrew spies arrived. Her life unfolded in the thin spaces between respectability and survival, carved out by sheer necessity and kept upright through a delicate daily balance. Her house was built right into the massive city wall, its rooms carved from the very stones keeping watch over Jericho. It was a perfect location, giving her privacy for her trade, while keeping her close to the merchants entering the gates. Now, dawn light spills through her windows as she prepares for the day. Her hands move with quiet efficiency, organizing her small rooms to welcome the travelers who will soon climb her stairs, seeking what she sells. A bright scarlet cord hangs from her window like a silent banner. a sign easily recognized by those in the know. It is far more than decoration. It marks her place in Jericho's complicated social web, where her trade brings both privilege and heavy shame. The men who knock on her door treat her with a mix of hunger and contempt. They need what she offers, but they hate themselves for needing it. Over the years, she has learned to read their faces, feed their desires, and somehow protect the quiet space deep inside herself. The local women view her with mixed emotions. Some glare with sharp, righteous disapproval as they pass by her home, crossing the dusty street to avoid her. Yet others offer quiet, knowing nods when no one is looking, understanding the brutal choices women must make to survive. A few even visit her in secret, seeking counsel they can share with no one else. Rahab has built a rock-solid reputation for keeping secrets. The wealthy merchants who visit know their confessions are completely safe with her. Battle-weary soldiers trust her with their deepest fears and doubts, while visiting lords pay handsomely for her absolute, unshakable silence. This loyalty is her finest asset, worth far more than gold. But there is much more to her life than her trade. Her work keeps her whole family alive, supporting her aging parents and the younger brothers and sisters who depend on her. Her earnings put bread on their table and keep a roof over their heads. Without her sacrifice, they would starve in the unforgiving streets of the ancient Near East. In the marketplace, merchants know her as a tough negotiator. She selects only the finest flax for spinning, recognizing quality others easily miss. Stall owners respect her sharp business mind, even if they whisper about her character. She pays her debts on time and drives hard bargains, earning grudging admiration from those who deal with her. Her daily routine follows a steady pattern built over years of hard work. She wakes before dawn to tend to her family before the working day begins, then heads to the market stalls for food and household supplies, walking through the crowded streets with quiet confidence. Back home, she sweeps and tidies her rooms with fastidious care, knowing that her living depends on a welcoming, peaceful space. Meanwhile, the religious rituals of Jericho roll on around her like a river around a stone. She joins the festivals and brings the required offerings, yet something deep inside her feels completely hollow. Jericho's pagan gods demand heavy sacrifices, but offer nothing back. Their cold stone eyes give no comfort, no real connection, and no meaning beyond simply getting by. Late at night, when the city quietens down, Rahab often sits resting by her open window. Gazing out past the dark stone walls toward the barren wilderness, she wonders what is out there. The stars seem to whisper of a life she cannot yet name, of some purpose larger than her narrow, exhausting reality. Her neighbors keep their distance. They tolerate her because she lives quietly and causes no trouble. Some even appreciate her silent presence, thankful that she keeps quiet about the things she sees at night. Yet real friendship is a luxury she can never afford. The city leaders recognize her, but never welcome her into their world. The priests ignore her entirely unless they need something. Merchants take what she offers, but lock her out of their social circles. The nobles treat her as a necessary evil, tolerated, but never accepted. She lives strictly on the fringes, useful, but utterly unvalued. Yet even here, Rahab has built a life of quiet dignity. She treats every guest with respect, no matter their rank. She keeps her humble home with deep pride, finding ways to make it beautiful. Her devotion to her family is absolute, and she sacrifices her own comfort to keep them safe. Her reputation reaches far past the massive city walls. Out-of-town merchants whisper of her sharp mind and loyalty, mapping out her house as they plan their journeys. They mark her door as a rare sanctuary. This distant respect gives her a security that her neighbors would never offer. But now, news of the advancing Hebrew army is hurting trade. Fewer travelers enter Jericho, and those who do are tense and hurried. The local men who visit carry a heavy weight of fear, whispering dark rumors that make the blood run cold. The air itself feels thick with dread, as if the desert is holding its breath. Rahab can smell a coming storm on the wind. Everything she knows is about to be shattered by forces she cannot stop. The ancient gods of her people seem powerless against this new threat. Even the massive walls that have guarded Jericho for generations might fail to hold back the approaching tide. Still, she goes about her day, clinging to the delicate balance that has kept her alive for so long. She has no idea that her life is about to collide with destiny, and that her choices will echo down through the ages. Her name will live on long after Jericho's walls crumble to dust. Right now, this woman of the shadows prepares for another ordinary day, utterly unaware that this day will change her life forever. Then come the spies. 2 men slip toward the city of Jericho just as the sun begins to dip below the western hills. They move with the quiet, careful steps of men who can read danger in every flickering shadow, every sudden noise, and every shift of the wind. Their dusty clothes make them look like ordinary travelers, but their eyes give them away, sharp, restless, scanning like trained scouts. Joshua picked these 2 carefully. They have exactly what it takes for a mission this delicate, knowing how to blend in and watch without being noticed. The success of the coming siege might depend entirely on what they discover inside Jericho's massive walls. This is far more than a simple scouting run. A divine command drives them forward. Just ahead, the city gates remain open for the last travelers of the day. Guards check each traveler with a bored, routine efficiency feeling for hidden weapons and asking basic questions about their business. The 2 spies blend right into the small crowd of merchants and travelers trying to get inside before nightfall. Their quick answers satisfy the guards, who have no reason to suspect anything. Once they pass through the gates, the men slip into the crowds to start their work. They wander the streets as if they have nowhere to be, but their eyes map everything. They count the guards and note where they stand, measuring the thick walls and memorizing the winding streets. They linger near the busy market stalls, listening closely to the local chatter, gathering clues about defenses and the mood of the people. But as night falls, they must make a critical choice. Where will they sleep? That choice will decide more than just their safety. It will determine if the whole mission succeeds. A busy inn offers comfort, but too many watching eyes. One wrong word or a strange gesture could betray them as Hebrew scouts. Then one remembers a tip from the marketplace. A merchant mentioned a woman who rents rooms to travelers, a house built right into the massive city wall itself. The spot is perfect. A house in the outer wall means easy escape routes if things go bad, and they are discovered, and a woman in her trade knows how to keep a secret. They slip through the darkening streets, following the merchant's directions. The narrow lanes twist and turn, leading them past the fine stone homes of the city's wealthy class. They head toward the outer edge, where the heavy city walls double as cramped, dusty living quarters. Rahab's house appears ahead like an answer to an unspoken prayer. Warm light spills from the windows, and the scarlet cord hanging from above tells them they have found the place. They walk up to the door like normal, weary travelers, though their hearts pound with the knowledge that their lives hang in the balance. The woman who opens the door reads them with sharp, intelligent eyes. She knows how to size up a man instantly, weighing his needs against the danger he brings. These 2 move differently than her usual crowd. They have the quiet, fluid grace of warriors, even if they wear the rough clothes of traders. Sun-baked skin shows they have traveled far, but their tense eyes reveal men who are always on guard. Rahab makes her decision in the space of a single heartbeat. She steps aside to let them in, her manner welcoming yet cautious. The men cross the threshold, passing from the busy public street into the quiet privacy of her home. Neither side trusts the other just yet here they are, brought together by fate. Inside, the spies find exactly what they needed. The rooms are built directly into the city wall,
with high windows looking out over the city streets and the dark fields beyond.
Rahab speaks softly, moving around with a quiet, practiced ease, clearly used to hosting guests who value their privacy. For the two spies, this setup is absolutely perfect. But as they settle into their hiding place, danger begins to close in. Someone in the city has sharp eyes and a very good memory. They noticed strangers entering Jericho today, men whose confident posture did not match their simple clothes. Soon, word starts spreading through the king's network of informants.
The spies do not know it yet, but their quiet entry was spotted.
The very traits that helped them slip past the gates also made them stand out from normal travelers. And in a tense city, standing out means danger. The king's guard is already asking questions and connecting the dots, hunting for the two strangers who arrived at the worst possible time. As night deepens, the spies start their real work. They question Rahab gently, choosing their words with care, digging for details on defenses and the local mood. Rahab proves to be an incredibly valuable source of intelligence, holding secrets that regular citizens would never have access to. But their talk reveals something deeper than military secrets. They learn about the raw fear paralyzing the entire city, how the news of the approaching Hebrew army has shattered Jericho's courage. She tells them about the panic among the leaders and their frantic debates over whether to fight or run. Most importantly, the spies realize the psychological battle is already won.
Suddenly, heavy footsteps echo in the alley below.
Harsh voices call out through the darkness, the sharp commands of royal soldiers on official business. The spies freeze, their instincts screaming a warning. They have been found out, and their safe haven is about to vanish. Rahab slips toward the window, her face pale in the flickering lamplight. She knows those voices and understands the danger. In seconds, the soldiers will be at her door, demanding answers she cannot give without betraying these men. The choice that will define her forever approaches with the heavy thud of marching boots. On the floor above, the spies brace hands sliding toward their daggers. They have stared down death before, but never like this. Their mission hangs on a razor edge, and with it, the fate of the coming siege. Everything hangs on the next few minutes. The arrival of these spies has started a chain reaction that will rewrite history. But first, they have to survive the night. The king's hunters are already on the prowl, slipping through the dark streets like shadows. Their trained eyes spot the tiny details ordinary people miss. Word has already reached the palace. Strangers slipped through the gates today. Men who did not walk like typical travelers. In a city teetering on the brink of total war, those differences cannot be ignored. The captain of the guard studies the reports, his worry growing. Two men traveling together, but walking like battle-hardened soldiers instead of soft merchants. They asked the right questions, gave the right answers. Still something felt off to the watchers. Their clothes screened trade, but their eyes spoke of war. The king's spy network has protected this city for years. Merchants, innkeepers, and gatekeepers all feed information about any outsiders passing through. This system has saved Jericho from spies before, but tonight it points to two men who might be the greatest threat Jericho has ever seen. The systematic search begins. Guards sweep through the local inns, interrogating the owners. They scour the crowded merchant camps. They hammer on doors of private homes known to put up travelers. Every stop comes up empty. But that silence only makes the captain more suspicious. The captain uses cold logic to narrow the search. Real Hebrew spies would never stay in the obvious spots. They would look for a quiet place somewhere off the grid where nobody asks questions. They would look for a layout that offers easy escape routes. and a hostess who values gold more than loyalty to the king. His mind turns to the houses built directly into the city wall. Those old structures are perfect for anyone trying to stay invisible. Being right on the edge of the wall means an easy getaway. The people living there exist on the fringes of society, making them unlikely to cooperate with the king's official investigations. If he were a spy, that is exactly where he would hide. The captain maps out the possibilities. A few wall houses host travelers, but one stands out: the House of Rahab. It has been a sanctuary for secrets and quiet transactions for years. She built her entire reputation on keeping secrets, making her home the ultimate hiding spot for anyone needing to stay invisible. The captain gathers his most trusted soldiers, men who have bled with him, whose loyalty is absolute. They know exactly how delicate this mission is. If the spies are at Rahab's house, they need them alive. Dead men cannot talk, and the king desperately needs intelligence on Hebrew troop movements. The soldiers check their weapons and prepare to move. Messengers rush through the streets. "Seal the gates immediately! Let no one leave!" Extra guards climb the high stone walls, their eyes searching the dark for any movement. Jericho is now a locked trap, ready to snap shut on anyone trying to run. The squad slips through the pitch-black streets in silence. They know these winding alleyways like the back of their hands. Every shadow could hide a threat. Every whisper might mean an ambush. These Hebrew spies already slipped into the city undetected. They will fight like cornered wolves if they are trapped inside. Outside Rahab's door, the soldiers halt. Soft light flickers in the windows, but the building is dead silent. No sentries outside, no sign of barricades. Either these spies are incredibly confident, or they have no idea they have been compromised. The captain gestures for his men to surround the house. They fan out with the effortless ease of veterans. Within seconds, every potential escape route is blocked. If those Hebrew spies are inside, there is no way out of the net. Tension thickens as the soldiers ready themselves. They have fought for their king before, but tonight feels different. Tonight, they hunt men who worship the God who parted the sea. Rumors of Hebrew victories have reached the palace, chilling the guards to the bone. But duty pushes them forward anyway. They serve the king of Jericho, and that means protecting the city. These spies are the greatest threat Jericho has faced in a generation. Catching them could buy precious time to prepare the city's defenses. The captain approaches the door hand resting on his bronze sword. Behind him, his men tense, ready for anything. The next few seconds will decide if they succeed or fail. The fate of two nations rests on what happens when that door swings open. Inside the dark house, Rahab hears the heavy boots outside and knows. The soldiers are here, forcing her to choose between safe surrender and deadly rebellion. Her choice will echo through history, but right now, she only knows that lives are on the line. Then comes the knock, heavy, demanding. The captain's voice cuts through the night, demanding entry in the king's name. The hunt over. The heavy pounding on Rahab's door echoes through the streets like the first beat of a war drum. She knows that sound. Soldiers. They are guards sent on the direct orders of the king. Her guests freeze in the dim lamplight, panic written all over their faces. In just a few seconds, she has to choose between her own life and these strangers. The captain's voice cuts through the heavy wood, harsh and demanding. "Open up in the name of the king. We are looking for 2 men who entered the city today." 2 men. Hebrew spies. The captain thinks they are hiding here. Inside the house, Rahab's mind frantically races through her options. She could hand them over right now and say she knew nothing. That would keep her safe from the king's anger and maybe even get her a reward. But she hesitates. Something deeper than fear stops her. These men trusted her, and she cannot throw them to their deaths. Upstairs, the spies brace themselves, hands slipping to their blades. They have faced death before, but never like this. Cornered in a stranger's house with nowhere to run. Their mission hangs in the balance, and with it the success of the coming siege. Everything depends on her next move, a single choice. But Rahab has already made up her mind. She moves fast, motioning for the men to follow. Her house is built right into the city wall, offering hiding spots a normal building never could. She leads them up to the roof, where bundles of flax are drying in the cool night air. These stalks are perfect for hiding two men. The spies get it. Instantly. They crawl deep into the flax, hiding like hunters in tall grass. They find the perfect positions to stay flat. The dry stalks brush over them, turning two armed men into invisible shadows. Years of training prepared them for this. Rahab quickly sweeps the area, smoothing the stalks so nothing looks out of place. Her hands are steady and fast, but her chest is pounding with a mix of terror and pure resolve. She has crossed a line, a dangerous line. There is absolutely no turning back for her now. The banging on the door gets louder. The captain is losing his patience, and he is losing it fast. Rahab smooths her dress, takes a deep breath, and prepares to put on the performance of her life. She has to convince these guards she knows absolutely nothing. She opens the door, looking just the right amount of annoyed and confused. She acts like a woman just woken up, rubbing her eyes, but ready to cooperate. The guards push right past her, scanning every dark corner. They search thoroughly. No corner is safe. "Yes," Rahab says, her voice sounding perfectly calm and cooperative. "Two men did come to my house today," she says. "They showed up just as the city gates were closing, looking for a place to stay. I gave them food and a bed, like I do for any traveler." The captain stares at her, looking for any hint of a lie. He has interrogated enough suspects over the years to spot the tiniest twitch of guilt or fear. Yet Rahab remains completely calm, her behavior showing nothing but a simple desire to help the guards. "Where are they right now?" he demands, his voice sharp and suspicious. Rahab shrugs her shoulders, playing dumb. "I have no idea where they came from or where they were heading. They left right before the gates shut for the night. If you hurry, you might catch them on the road to the Jordan crossings." The lie flows from her lips as easily as water. In her line of work, she has learned how to read men, knowing exactly what they want to hear to get what she needs. Tonight, those survival skills might just save lives. The guards tear through the house, checking every possible hiding spot. They search the rooms and storage areas. They find nothing. No Hebrew spies. The home looks completely normal, just a place for weary travelers. But the captain still isn't buying it. Something about this house feels completely off, even if he cannot put his finger on exactly what is wrong. Maybe she is just too calm, or her story fits together a little too perfectly. Or maybe it is just the tension that hangs over the city whenever the Hebrew army is mentioned. "You are sure they left before the gates closed?" he asks, watching her face closely. "Absolutely sure," Rahab replies, without a second thought. "They were in a real hurry to leave. They said they needed to cross the Jordan River before sunrise. I figured they had some urgent business to attend to." The captain weighs her words against his gut feeling. Her story makes sense, but spies would definitely try to get out of Jericho quickly. The timing could be a coincidence, or it might be exactly what you would expect from Hebrew scouts gathering intel on Jericho. Now time is becoming a major factor. If those spies really have left the city, every second he wastes searching here lets them slip further away. The Jordan River crossings are only a few hours' ride from here. Once they cross that river, they are safe among their own people. "Show me the room where they stayed," he orders, trying one last time to find any proof. Rahab leads him to the guest room, a simple space with a couple of sleeping mats and a tiny table. Someone was here, clearly, but there is no proof they were Hebrew spies. The captain searches anyway, hunting for anything that might give away who they really were. But he finds nothing. The room looks exactly like any space where two normal travelers just slept. Any evidence has been carefully cleared away or hidden. The woman's story holds up, and the empty room backs up every word she says. The captain makes his choice. If you are lying, woman, you will answer to the king himself. But if those men really left, we are wasting precious time. Every single second we lose allows them to slip further away.
He waves his men forward. They have to start the hunt right now if they want any hope of catching the Hebrew spies before they reach safety.
The soldiers march out of the house with quiet discipline, their minds fixed entirely on the hunt ahead. Once the last guard fades into the dark, Rahab shuts the door and sinks against it. Her hands shake, the weight of what she just did finally hitting her. She just lied straight to the king's men, looked them in the eye, and sent them chasing ghosts into the night.
If they find out she is dead.
It is that simple. Yet beneath the terror, something else stirs, a deep sense of rightness. She chose a path far bigger than her own survival. Somehow, the God of the Hebrews has used her to shield his servants. She is caught up in a story vast beyond her imagination. The lie worked. But the night is young, and the real test is just beginning. Rahab's bargain. The heavy thud of marching boots dies away in the distance, leaving behind a silence thick with tension. She stays pinned to the door, ear pressed flat against the wood, straining to hear if the guards turn back. Only when she is absolutely sure they are gone does she pull away. She climbs up to the flat roof where the two spies hide under piles of drying flax. The dry stalks rustle softly under the heavy weight of the men as they slowly crawl out, their faces pale with relief and utter exhaustion. They survive the immediate danger, but they know they still stand on a razor's edge. The guards are gone.
Rahab whispers in the cool dark.
They think you fled the city and crossed over the Jordan, and they are riding hard for the river crossings right now, chasing ghosts, while you hide here. The spies trade looks, realizing what she just did for them. She risked everything for absolute strangers defying her own king. Courage like that cannot go unsaid. But more than that, it demands an explanation. Why? The older spy asks, his voice quiet with genuine wonder. Why risk your own neck for us? You easily could have handed us to the guards and taken their reward. Instead, you face the king's absolute fury if this lie is found out. Rahab steps to the edge of the flat roof, her eyes searching the dark streets below. The great walls of Jericho loom in the starlight, massive and cold. But tonight, they do not feel like a shield. They feel like a trap waiting to snap shut. I know exactly who you are, she says softly, her voice steady. You serve the God who pulled your people out of Egypt with massive signs and wonders. Everyone in Jericho has heard the stories. Your God dried up the waters of the Red Sea right before you when you fled Egypt. He gave you total victory over the kings east of the Jordan. The spies hang on every word, knowing this moment changes everything. She knows way more than they expected, and what she knows has massive weight stretching far beyond their simple scouting mission. Terror of your God has gripped us, Rahab says, her voice growing firmer. The hearts of our people are melting with dread because of you. No one in this city has any fight left in them. Your Lord God is the true God, ruler of heaven above and earth below. These words strike the spies with unexpected force. They came to scout out Jericho's defenses, but instead they have found something far more valuable than stone walls. The mental battle is already won. Jericho's spirit is completely broken long before the first arrow is shot or the first stone is thrown. But Rahab is not done. She turns to look them dead in the eye, her face dead serious. "So now I beg you to swear an oath to me by your Lord God. I have shown you true kindness, so promise you will show that same kindness to my family. Give me a reliable sign that you will spare the lives of my father, mother, brothers and sisters, and everyone who belongs to them." Her terms are simple, but the stakes are enormous. She put her own neck on the line to save them. Now she is asking them to shield the people she loves most. Mercy for mercy, life for life. The older spy weighs her request very carefully. He has the power to strike a deal, but he must be absolutely sure they can keep their word when the city falls. Jericho's doom is already written by God himself, but there is always room for mercy in his plans. "Our lives for yours," he says finally, his voice heavy with the weight of an oath. "If you do not betray our mission, then when the Lord gives us this land, we will treat you with absolute kindness and loyalty. But covenants have rules, safety measures to protect everyone involved. When the walls come crashing down, they cannot protect people they cannot see. And Rahab needs to understand the exact terms of this deal. When we enter the land, the younger spy tells her, you must tie this scarlet cord in the window you used to lower us down. Bring your father, your mother, your siblings, and your entire family inside this house with you. This red cord is suddenly much more than a simple escape rope. It becomes a shield of safety, marking her home out from every other house when judgment strikes. It is not just an ID tag. This is a sacred covenant between Rahab and Israel's God. Anyone who steps outside your doors into the street during the attack will be responsible for their own death, the older spy warns, making sure she understands the cold reality. We will be completely innocent of their blood. But if anyone inside your home is harmed, we will answer for their life. The terms are set clear and absolute. Safety only belongs in the house marked for those who trust the God of the Hebrews. This scarlet cord will stand as both their beacon and their boundary, marking the exact spot where mercy triumphs over judgment. Rahab accepts these conditions without a moment of hesitation. The bargain brings real hope where there was none, offering survival against certain destruction. "Let it be exactly as you have said," she says, sealing the agreement. A heavy silence settles over the three of them. Together they have forged an alliance that goes far beyond nation and culture. A Canaanite woman and two Hebrew spies have found common ground, a shared awe of divine power, and a desperate need for mercy. The cool night air carries distant sounds of a city drifting to sleep as guards call out across the high stone walls. Dogs bark somewhere in the dark. Life goes on as usual, completely unaware that history just changed on this rooftop. A covenant has been made, destined to echo through generations. Rahab stares at the scarlet cord in her hands, knowing it is much more than mere rope. It represents her faith in a God she has never served, her trust in men she barely knows, and her hope for a future she can only begin to imagine. This cord will hang in her window, a quiet declaration of allegiance to a power far greater than Jericho. The bargain is set. The terms are agreed. Now comes the hardest part, simply waiting and holding on to faith, holding on to hope while watching her city prepare for war and trusting promises in a place where such trust is treason. She has chosen her side. The servants of the God of heaven have found an unlikely ally. The stage is finally set for a drama poised to unfold when the heavy walls of Jericho face their true test. Meanwhile, the scarlet cord feels different in Rahab's hands. No longer just a simple rope, it now feels sacred. She slowly turns it over, studying its texture in the pale starlight. This ordinary thread now connects her to a future she can barely grasp. It is a lifeline to the God of Israel. "Tell me about your God," she whispers, a sudden hunger in her voice. "I want to understand this power that makes mighty kings tremble and makes the very waters obey."
The older spy sits back on the rooftop, sensing the deep importance of this quiet moment. This woman risked everything to save them, and her questions deserve real, honest answers. Beyond any political calculation, she is experiencing a genuine spiritual awakening. "Our Lord is not like the gods of other nations," he begins, his voice carrying the steady rhythm of a familiar story. "He does not live in temples made by human hands. He needs no gold or silver to hear his people when they pray. He is the living God who made heaven and earth." Rahab hangs on every word, listening like a traveler who has spent years in the dry desert and finally finds cool, deep water. The gods of Jericho have always felt so distant, demanding, and impossible to please, requiring elaborate rituals and costly offerings while giving nothing in return. But this God feels different, close, kind, and deeply compassionate. "For 400 years we were slaves in Egypt," the spy continues his words, painting pictures in the shadows. "Our people groaned under the heavy burden of their suffering, and the Lord heard their cries. He sent Moses to lead us out, proving his power through signs and wonders that shook Egypt to its core." To Rahab, these ancient stories begin to bloom. 10 devastating plagues brought Egypt to its knees. She hears of the night death passed over Hebrew homes, taking the firstborn of their oppressors, and the desperate flight to the edge of the Red Sea, with the armies of Pharaoh closing in from behind. "We stood trapped at the water's edge with nowhere to run," the younger spy adds, his voice still carrying a quiet wonder. "Pharaoh's war chariots were rushing right toward us, and the massive sea blocked our way ahead. But Moses raised his staff, and the Lord drove back the sea with a fierce east wind." Rahab can see it in her mind. Towering walls of water like massive cliffs, and the muddy seafloor turned to dry land. An entire nation marched across their feet, staying completely dry. A power like that defies any human logic. "Did your people really walk right through the sea?" she asks, her voice full of wonder. "Every single man, woman, and child," the older spy confirms, "along with all our herds and belongings. Every last thing made it safely to the other side, while the sea stood like a wall on our right and on our left." That image burns deep into Rahab's mind. Living near the Jordan, she knows the raw power of rushing water. The thought of such massive forces being held back by a divine word stretches her mind to its absolute limits. Yet their string of victories makes it impossible to doubt. "And when your enemies chased you into the water," she whispers, already guessing the end, "the Lord looked down and threw the Egyptian army into total chaos," the spy answers quietly. "The wild waters rushed back and swallowed every chariot and horseman in Pharaoh's army. Not a single one survived." A heavy silence follows, carrying the weight of divine judgment. Rahab realizes she has glimpsed a God who is both beautiful and terrifying. A God who rescues his people and sweeps away their enemies with the very same ease. What this means for Jericho sits like a cold stone in her chest. "We wandered for 40 years in the wilderness," the younger spy continues, learning to trust his daily care. "He fed us with bread from heaven, poured water for us from solid rock, and guided us with a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. Every need was met, every promise kept." Hearing this completely reshapes how Rahab views divine power compared to the greedy, empty gods of Jericho. Pagans build grand temples and buy expensive sacrifices for gods who barely protect them. But this Hebrew God seems to actually love caring for his people.
He helps them without demanding payments they cannot afford. But why tell me this, Rahab asks, though deep down she already knows. Why share holy stories with someone like me? The older spy looks at her, his face softening in the dim starlight. Because the Lord our God sees no difference between rich and poor, Hebrew or foreigner, those born into his family and those who choose to join it. He looks at the heart, not the bloodline. The words hit hard. All her life she had only been defined by her trade, her status, and her low place in Jericho. A God who looks past all that to see her heart, it was a wild, beautiful hope she never dared dream of. You talk about choosing? This covenant? She says softly. Could a choice like that really belong to someone like me? Your choice is already made, the younger spy says with a gentle smile. Tonight when you hid us, instead of turning us in, by hiding us, you showed your heart belongs to the Lord, not the dead idols of Jericho. That faith saved our lives, and your soul too. Change comes slow, like dawn creeping over the eastern hills. Rahab feels a deep shift in her soul, a quiet truth settling far deeper than mere head knowledge. Israel's God had been drawing her in all along, through the rumors, the terror gripping her city, and now the quiet strength of these two men. I want to serve your God, she says, the words rising from deep within her. Whatever the cost, whatever it demands, belonging to the Lord is what I want, not serving gods who never even saw me. Her vow hangs in the night air like incense. A woman of Jericho decides to place her faith in the God of Israel, crossing ancient boundaries of culture and country to embrace a destiny she cannot yet fully understand. The red rope in her hands is no longer just a way to escape. It has become a sacred token of their covenant, binding her to the God who looks at the heart and welcomes anyone who looks for him. The faith that will save her has taken root, growing quietly in the dark before dawn. The escape must happen now. Dawn is coming. The horizon shows the first faint, cold light of morning. Purple and gold fill the morning sky. Time is the enemy. Every passing minute brings the sun closer, and with it, the absolute certainty of being caught. The spies must flee before the city wakes to its daily routine. Rahab leads them to the small window facing outward, away from the streets. No early risers will spot them here. Below the massive city wall drops straight down into a dark, rocky ravine, offering perfect cover if they move quickly. This window is more than an exit. It is the gateway to the wild hills where the Hebrew army waits. That scarlet cord feels different now as she gets ready to lower them down. A tool of her old trade is turning into a shield of safety, marking her home for mercy when judgment falls on Jericho. Somehow, the change feels right. Common things made holy by God. This rope will hold your weight, she whispers. She assures them, testing its strength with experienced hands. I know ropes from my trade, and this one is brand new, spun from tough flax. The older spy runs his fingers along the weave, knowing their very lives depend on this single strand. It is a 30-foot drop to the rocky floor below, enough to break bones or kill a man if the rope snaps. But the cord is thick and woven tight, showcasing the best craftsmanship of the land. Once you hit the dirt, Rahab whispers, her voice low and steady. Follow the ravine, straight out toward the hills. It keeps you off the main roads where the king's soldiers are searching. Hide during the day and move only under the cover of darkness until you reach safety. The younger spy nods. They had memorized escape routes back at camp, but nothing beats the advice of someone who actually lives here. This could save them hours of deadly exposure. 3 days. That is what the older spy tells her, repeating the instructions they gave her earlier. Hide in the hills for 3 days until the search party returns. Then you can go home safely. The timing is critical.
The guards chasing ghosts toward the Jordan River will need time to scour the riverbanks and head back to the palace in defeat. Only when the search completely dies down can the two spies safely slip across the hills back to their own battle lines. Rahab ties one end of the thick red cord to a heavy wooden beam over the window. The timber is hardened by years of dry desert wind, tough enough to support a grown man without cracking. "Remember our agreement?" the older spy whispers as he gets ready to drop down. "When we return with our army, you must tie this exact red cord in your window. Bring your entire family inside and keep them there. Anyone who steps outside that door is on their own." These instructions carry the ultimate weight of life and death. Rahab nods solemnly, knowing their survival rests entirely on her following these steps to the very letter. The red rope must hang clearly. Her family must stay inside. The rules are simple, but there is absolutely zero room for error. "But what if they refuse to come?" she asks, letting a dark fear slip out. "What if my family simply refuses to believe your God will keep them safe? What if they choose to trust Jericho's high stone walls instead of your promise?" Her worry goes far deeper than a simple family dispute. Rahab had made her own choice to trust the God of Israel, but faith is something you can never force on anyone. Every soul has to decide for themselves to trust in cold stone walls, or divine mercy in human strength, or God. You can only give them the choice. The younger spy speaks softly. "The Lord never forces anyone to believe if their heart is closed. But those who choose to trust His shelter will find that His promises never fail." Carefully, the first spy begins his descent, moving with the quiet ease of a soldier used to dangerous heights. The rope holds his weight without a single sound, and he quickly vanishes into the dark ravine below. Within moments, a soft whistle signals that he has reached the ground safely. The second spy pauses at the window, looking back at the woman who saved their lives. "The Lord our God will surely remember your kindness," he says simply. "Your name will be spoken with honor among our people for generations to come." Then he too vanishes over the sill, sliding down the cord with military speed. The soft scrape of his feet against the wall blends with the distant sounds of the city waking up. A dog barks somewhere in the dark. A rooster crows to announce the dawn. Normal life goes on, completely unaware that history was just made in the space of a single heartbeat. Rahab watches until both men disappear into the wilderness, their dark forms swallowed by the rugged hills surrounding Jericho. The mission that brought them to her door has succeeded. They carry away not only vital intelligence about the city defenses, but also the knowledge that fear has already broken Jericho's spirit. She pulls the rope back up and coils it carefully, knowing this same cord will soon hang in her window as a beacon of hope. The scarlet thread that once marked her trade will become a symbol of divine mercy, visible proof that the God of Israel shields anyone who seeks Him. The escape plan worked, but Rahab's toughest trial still lies ahead. She must convince her family to trust in promises they cannot see, and to put their faith in a God they have never served, to believe their survival means staying inside a house marked for rescue while the city crumbles around them. Dawn breaks over Jericho as the woman who chose faith over fear prepares for the hardest conversation of her life. The spies return to Joshua. The two scouts move through the wilderness like shadows made of flesh. Their training shows in every silent step. For 3 days they stay hidden in the rocky hills surrounding Jericho, watching the dust clouds raised by the king's soldiers as they search the Jordan crossings for men who were never there. Only when the pursuit turns back toward the city do they start their own journey home. The barren land they cross shows signs of divine help. Springs of fresh water appear precisely where they need them. Natural shelter appears just when the desert sun grows too hot. Game trails lead them safely around the camps of hostile tribes. Every detail points to a God who goes before His people, preparing their way. The Hebrew camp spreads across the plains like a massive city of tents and banners. Smoke rises from countless cooking fires, and the sounds of daily life make a familiar symphony of home. After days in enemy territory, the sight of their own people brings a relief too deep for words. Joshua's tent stands right at the center of the camp, marked by the banners of Israel's leader, who directs both war and rule from here. Guards recognize the returning spies immediately, their faces showing the relief of men who feared these scouts might never return from their dangerous mission. "Bring them to Joshua right away," the guard captain commands. Israel's leader has been waiting for this report since the day they left for Jericho. The spies walk through the busy camp, greeting friends and fellow soldiers with quiet nods. Their mission has succeeded beyond expectations, but the full weight of what they learned will only be clear when they share it with Israel's commander. Joshua looks up from the map on his table as they enter. His face shows the strain of a leader carrying an entire nation's future. Taking Jericho is far more than just another military victory. It will secure Israel's foothold in the Promised Land and prove God's faithfulness to his covenant promises. Joshua says simply, his voice carrying the authority of command. The older spy steps forward, choosing his words with care. "We have seen the land, and indeed, the Lord has given all of it to us. The people of Jericho are melting with fear because of us." These words carry weight far beyond military reports. The psychological battle is already won. The fame of Israel's God went before them into Canaan, breaking their spirit before the first arrow flies. "Tell me about their defenses," Joshua commands, leaning forward. The younger spy shares the details. The walls are strong built, in thick layers of massive stone. The outer wall is 30 feet high and 20 feet thick. The inner wall rises even higher, but the people inside have lost their courage. The military analysis goes on in detail, noting guard positions, weak points in the street layouts, and the location of the king's palace. Every detail for the coming siege is carefully recorded. Yet the most important discovery has nothing to do with stone and mortar. "The fear of our God has fallen upon them," the older spy continues. "They have heard about our escape from Egypt, about the miracles in the wilderness, and our victories over kings across the Jordan. Their hearts are melting like wax." Joshua takes this in with the satisfaction of a leader whose strategy has worked. Terror is often more effective than battering rams in bringing down walls. An army with no will to fight has already lost. What about the people, Joshua asks? Are they united in their resistance? Or are there divisions we can use to our advantage? The spies look at each other, remembering the woman who saved them. "We found an ally inside the city," the older spy reports. "A woman named Rahab showed us kindness and hid us from the king's guards. She put her faith in our God and asked for mercy for her family when the city falls." This request is no problem for Joshua. The God of Israel always welcomes those who choose to join his people, like Ruth the Moabitess or Caleb the Canaanite, and countless others had found a place among the tribes of Israel because of their faith, not their blood. Joshua asks them, "What did you promise this woman?" Joshua inquires, knowing that any agreement made in his name must be honored. The younger spy explains that they swore to spare her life and the lives of her family provided she meets a few conditions. He explains she has to tie a bright scarlet cord in her window as a visible sign, and she must gather all her relatives inside her house during the attack. Anyone who steps outside will be beyond their protection. Joshua nods in approval. The terms are fair and reflect divine justice. Those who choose to trust in God's mercy will find it waiting for them. Those who reject it will face the consequences. Her house is built right into the city wall, the older spy adds. That scarlet cord will be easy for our forces to spot when the attack begins. Finding and protecting her will be simple. The scouts finish their report with strategic recommendations based on everything they saw. Jericho's morale is completely shattered. Its people are paralyzed by fear, meaning a swift, decisive strike will almost certainly succeed, whereas a long, drawn-out siege might give the defenders time to find their courage. But Joshua has already received his orders from a far higher authority. Taking the city will follow God's plan, not standard military strategy. The walls will fall, not by human hands, but by divine power, proving to every nation that Israel serves the living God. Your mission has succeeded beyond anything we could have hoped, Joshua tells the two spies. You have proved that the Lord has indeed handed this country over to us. The people of Jericho know their gods cannot save them from our God. The spies accept their commander's praise with the quiet pride of men who have pulled off a highly dangerous job. They have brought back critical details that will guide the coming battle. But even more than that, they saw direct proof that God goes ahead of his people, preparing their path through the terror and the unexpected faith of their enemies. Walking out of Joshua's tent, the two men know they have done far more than just spy on a city. They have witnessed the sheer weight of God's reputation, seeing how the fame of his past miracles paves the way for future victories. Now the stage is set for the most unusual siege in history, a battle designed to show off divine power instead of human force, where walls will collapse to the sound of trumpets rather than battering rams. Scouts have returned, proving that the Lord has given Jericho over to Israel. Now it is time to claim that promise. The great advance begins. Morning light danced across the Jordan River, throwing golden reflections that seemed to whisper ancient promises. Joshua stood right at the water's edge, his calloused hands tightly gripping the staff that had guided his people through decades of wandering. Behind him, the massive crowds of Israel stretched across the plains like an endless sea of hope. But the river before them was flowing with dangerous strength that spring. Heavy winter rains had flooded the banks, turning a simple crossing into a raging torrent that seemed to mock any hope of passage. Yet Joshua felt no fear. The same God who parted the Red Sea decades ago was calling them forward into their inheritance. The priests carrying the sacred ark stepped onto the muddy bank first. As their bare feet touched the cold water, something incredible happened. The roaring currents rushing downstream suddenly began to slow down and grow quiet. Far upstream, the river started piling up on itself, forming a massive wall of water that defied every law of nature. The riverbed beneath their feet turned to dry ground, as if the earth itself opened up to welcome them. News spread through the camp like wildfire. Children pointed in absolute wonder at the miracle happening right before them. Mothers held their babies tight, realizing they were witnessing something far beyond human understanding. The older generation remembered Moses and the Red Sea, their hearts filling with that familiar awe. Joshua raised his voice over the quiet hum of the stunned crowd. His voice carried the heavy weight of divine authority, yet it flowed with the gentle care of a shepherd guiding his sheep. He reminded them that this very moment fulfilled the promises made to their ancestors long ago. The land of milk and honey lay just on the other side. They began to cross in a deep, reverent silence. Family by family, tribe by tribe, the people of Israel walked right onto the dry riverbed. Their sandals gripped ground that should have been deep underwater. Some stopped to touch the dry earth, just to make sure they were not dreaming. As they walked, many stared toward the distant walls of Jericho. The city sat high on its hill, like a stubborn, defiant fortress, its massive stone walls gleaming in the afternoon sun. From far away, it looked completely unbeatable, its towers reaching toward the sky with terrifying strength. Yet, after seeing the river obey their God, those walls did not seem so terrifying anymore. The Ark of the Covenant stayed perfectly still in the middle of the channel until everyone crossed safely. The priests holding the ark stood like statues, their presence keeping the miracle alive as the waters remained split. Only when Joshua gave the word did they lift their heavy burden and step onto the bank. Behind them, the Jordan rushed back into its path with a deafening roar. The waters that had held back so obediently now crashed forward, seemingly eager to reclaim their ancient rocky path. The crossing was finally finished, but its memory would echo through generations. Joshua ordered 12 men to gather large stones from the riverbed, one for each tribe of Israel. These stones would serve as a lasting monument, a permanent reminder of the day when heaven touched earth and made the impossible happen. When their children asked about these rocks in the years to come, the story would be passed down once more. Their first night in the Promised Land felt entirely different from any night in the past. The night air seemed to hum with new possibility. Fathers sat with their children retelling stories of the great ancestors who had walked this very ground centuries ago. Mothers sang lullabies of home at last. Campfires dotted the dark plains like stars fallen to earth. Around those flames, families shared meals that tasted sweeter than anything they ate in the wilderness. The bread felt richer, and the water was incredibly refreshing. Gathering firewood felt sacred that evening, like they were building their own future piece by wooden piece with their bare hands. Joshua slipped through the camp that night. He was amazed by what God had done. Every face he passed held that same look, raw joy and a quiet waiting. No more wandering. Their long-promised inheritance had finally begun. Tonight was purely for rest. Across the valley, the high walls of Jericho loomed black against a sky of cold stars. Behind those massive stones, Rahab fastened her bright red cord to the window frame, whispering prayers to Israel's God. Little did she know that across the dry riverbed, the people she was risking her life to trust were sleeping through their very first night in the Promised Land. But inside Jericho, terror was waking up. Dawn broke over the city with a heavy silence that pressed hard against the stone. The morning calls never came from the empty market. Instead, a strange, quiet tension filled the narrow streets, making merchants leave their shops and mothers pull their little ones close. High up, the ancient watchtowers buzzed with absolute panic. Guards stared out from the high walls. They could not believe the sight before them. The deep river that always kept them safe was gone. Nothing but dry, cracked mud where rushing waters should have been. And past that empty bed, a terrifying view met every guard on the wall the Israelites had crossed overnight. Thousands of their dark tents dotted the valley like a plague of wild weeds. Gray smoke from their morning campfires drifted upward, blurring the horizon into a single ominous mist. Rumors swept through the city like fire through dry grass. Shop owners left their tables. Farmers abandoned their crops. Parents called their children inside. Quiet whispers replaced the usual games of the street. The king of Jericho quickly called his advisors together, his calm completely gone. These rulers, normally so sure of themselves, were suddenly staring down an enemy unlike anything they had ever faced. Spies spoke of a mysterious nation led by forces no mortal could grasp. Inside the royal chamber, desperate arguments rose and fell like waves crashing against a dying cliff. Some pushed for an immediate strike, hoping to catch the Hebrews before they organized. Others begged for caution. They wanted to hide behind the thick stone walls that had protected their ancestors for centuries. The king sat silent. His mind was flooded with terrifying rumors. Foreign cities turned to ash and massive armies blown away like dry leaves in a gale. Old empires had vanished into history. Outside the palace, the common folks tried to act normal, but everyone was just pretending. Bakers kept shoveling loaves into the ovens, though their hands shook as they kneaded the dough. Weavers threw their shuttles but kept stopping to stare out the windows looking for signs in the sky. In the dark temples, priests frantically offered sacrifices to their silent idols. Thick incense burned night and day. Yet their gods remained completely silent, cold eyes staring back at the weeping crowds. Even the children felt the shift in the air, though they could not explain it. Laughter died, replaced by quiet fear. Children drew pictures of city walls in the dust as if their small fingers could make the heavy rocks stronger. Down in the square, the loud, cheerful bartering was replaced by a tense murmur. Whispers cut short whenever a stranger passed. Prices jumped as merchants panicked about tomorrow. Some hoarded their grain, while others practically gave it away, ready to run. Behind closed doors, families huddled in tight circles. Supper time went on for hours. Parents just could not bear to send their little ones to sleep. They told the old family tales slowly, hoping words could protect them better than stone. Down by the lower walls, the innkeepers and women of the night faced a strange new reality. Their usually busy taverns, typically busy with visiting traders, were now filled with terrified locals searching for news. They hoped that anyone talking to travelers might know something about the invaders. Rahab slipped through this trembling crowd with quiet, deliberate steps. Living right inside the city wall gave her a clear view of both the terror inside and the massive camp outside. She looked at her neighbors differently now, knowing they would soon have to choose just as she had. Meanwhile, guards checked and rechecked the heavy gates. Spearheads were ground sharp and food stores counted. But underneath all the frantic work was a quiet, sinking feeling, realizing that earthly defenses were useless against a God-backed enemy. Night fell, but nobody in the city slept. Sentinels stared blindly into the blackness, searching for torches in the Hebrew camp. At home, families held on to each other for dear life. Those high stone walls that used to mean safety suddenly felt like the prison borders of a trap. And there, dangling from Rahab's window, the red cord fluttered in the night wind. A tiny sign of hope in a city drowning in terror. She alone held a secret that meant the difference between life and death. Her trust in this foreign god grew stronger as the shadows closed in. Soon the bizarre plan of attack would begin. Joshua's simple tent stood quiet in the cold hours before dawn. Inside, a plan was taking shape that would change everything. The commander knelt on the dirt floor, a single oil lamp lighting his tired, weathered face. He felt the crushing weight of 1,000,000 lives on his shoulders, yet his heart remained steady as he listened. Then God gave him orders that made absolutely no sense, a strategy that broke every single rule of ancient military science. They would build no massive towers, no soldiers would climb up tall ladders, no heavy rams would smash the city gates. Instead, victory would come from simple, quiet obedience to a plan that sounded like foolishness to the world. The plan was beautifully simple and deeply mysterious. For 6 days, the entire army of Israel would march around the city just once a day. 7 priests would carry trumpets crafted from ram's horns, walking ahead of the Ark of the Covenant. The soldiers had to keep absolute silence on these marches, letting only the sound of their footsteps and the blaring horns announce their presence. But on the 7th day, everything would change. All 7 full laps around the city, 7 priests carrying 7 ram's horns. And at the perfect moment, a massive, earth-shaking shout from every single throat. The massive walls of Jericho would crumble not from military power, but through divine strength, responding to quiet, absolute obedience. Joshua stepped outside his tent just as the first morning light brushed the eastern horizon. His face showed the deep calm of a leader who had spoken with the Lord. What seemed impossible had become inevitable in his mind, transformed by faith into a quiet certainty. The tribal commanders gathered around their leader. Their faces showed that mix of wonder and trust built over years in the desert. When Joshua spoke, his voice carried the heavy weight of someone delivering words directly from heaven, not just his own thoughts. Hearing this strange strategy, some officers exchanged uneasy glances. Men who had survived brutal battles were now asked to join a quiet march that felt more like a holy ritual than a real war. Yet they obeyed. Years of witnessing miracles had forged their trust in Joshua's leadership. The priests selected to carry the sacred trumpets prepared with quiet solemnity. These rough instruments, fashioned from ram's horns, would serve as the main weapons in this bizarre siege. Their call would echo with far more force than any spear or sword, pulling down the power of heaven through a haunting melody. At the very front of the line went the sacred chest, the Ark of the Covenant itself. Having the Ark there changed the entire campaign from a military siege into a sacred act of worship. The very same chest that guided them through the desert would now lead them to their first victory in Canaan. Work began across the camp. Soldiers polished their bronze armor and sharpened their swords, though many wondered if they would even use them. Mothers whispered to their children of a coming wonder, a day to be remembered forever. Elders recalled ancient wonders when the Lord saved his people in ways that left nations trembling. The order of the march was set with strict precision. The armed warriors would lead the way, followed immediately by the 7 priests with their horns. Then came the ark, hoisted by the Levites, while a rear guard of warriors brought up the back. This silent procession was a physical prayer, tracing a circle of faith around the stone fortress. Word of the plan swept through the tents like a sudden breeze over dry desert scrub. Some cheered, remembering the parted Jordan River. Others stayed silent, thinking it through. They wondered how simple footsteps could break walls that had survived centuries of storms and siege. Soon the tribal chiefs gathered their clans, explaining the role each family would play. They would stay behind in the tents, but their silent prayers would accompany the marching soldiers as they walked, forming an unspoken plea rising to heaven with every lap. Meanwhile, craftsmen checked every ram's horn to make sure they were flawless. The horns were scrubbed and polished until they shone in the firelight. Each priest quietly practiced the specific calls he would blow, knowing their blast was a crucial part of the divine plan. As the night before the first march settled in, the camp grew quieter than usual. Quiet talk around the glowing campfires centered on the morning. Parents tucked in their young ones, whispering of past miracles God had done. Elders spoke of Moses, knowing God would act again. Joshua walked through the camp, bringing quiet confidence. His steady gaze showed absolute faith in the word of the Lord. The impossible was already real to him, and that conviction spread quietly to every soul in Israel. Above them, the stars seemed to burn with a strange brilliance, as though the heavens themselves were waiting for the morning sun to rise. Across the dark plain, the massive walls of Jericho stood silent and unmoved, completely unaware that their fate was already sealed by the hand of the Almighty. Then came the morning. The sun climbed over the eastern hills, stretching long, dark shadows across the plains surrounding the fortress. Those ancient stone walls now faced a divine challenge. In the camp, excitement hummed as the soldiers prepared for the most bizarre military campaign ever seen. Suddenly, the trumpet blast, signaling the start of the march, pierced the air. It sounded different than any call they had ever heard. The tone was piercingly clear, carrying to the very edges of the camp and echoing sharply off the stone face of Jericho. Hardened soldiers who knew every battle call recognized something sacred in this sound. The advance guard moved into formation with practiced ease, their iron weapons catching the early sun. These were battle-tested men, warriors who had learned to value divine direction over human war plans. Their calm faces showed the confidence of men obeying an order from the Creator himself. Just behind them, 7 priests raised the heavy ram's horns to their lips. The sound that followed was nothing like the music of normal war. Those horns sang with the chilling voice of heaven, a haunting, powerful melody carrying ancient promises across the landscape. Every note vibrated with the weight of ancient covenants. Just behind them, the Levites carefully hoisted the gold-plated Ark of the Covenant with deep reverence. This sacred chest, carrying the stone tablets of the law, turned a military advance into a deep act of worship. Its presence made it clear that this was no ordinary army on the march, but the family of God claiming what was promised. Slowly the great line began to move. A heavy, sudden silence fell over the ranks. The order had gone out absolute quiet, and 30,000 voices obeyed without a word. Only the thud of marching feet and the sacred trumpets broke the morning air. It set a steady rhythm that almost matched the heartbeat of the earth. The dusty path around Jericho's walls allowed the army to see the defenders' faces on the battlements. Soldiers and citizens just stared down at the bizarre parade passing right beneath them. What they saw shattered every rule of how wars were fought. The Israelite warriors just marched with their heads held high, looking straight ahead instead of up at the high stone walls. Their quiet was not fear, but the deep stillness of faith. Every single step brought them closer to a triumph won not by swords, but by simply following the Creator's quiet command. The priests kept blowing their trumpets, a long, haunting melody that echoed along the valley. The sound rose and fell like waves against a cliff, turning the strange march into a quiet act of worship. Their steady breathing and long endurance showed a preparation that went far deeper than physical drill. High on the ramparts, the people of Jericho watched with creeping confusion. This was not the bloodthirsty attack they had prepared for. No ladders rose, no battering rams, no wild war cries. Instead, they just watched a solemn procession circle their city with quiet, total determination. The Ark of the Covenant drew every eye from the walls. Wild rumors of its devastating power had already reached the city through desert merchants. Seeing it carried with such deep reverence made the whole scene feel far heavier. As they rounded the northern wall, the harsh morning sun revealed their full, terrifying numbers. Those disciplined rows stretched out much further than anyone had estimated. Seeing so many people move as one in absolute order sent a cold shiver through the watching crowd. The march took nearly all morning. It was a steady, unhurried pace, almost like the slow, steady breathing of a land itself. Every footprint felt intentional, as though their very steps were claiming and hallowing the dirt beneath them. Once they reached their starting point, the day's march was done. The vast army simply turned and walked back to camp without a single cheer. That same heavy silence followed them as they pulled back, leaving nothing but dust, memory, and the fading hum of the sacred horns. The citizens of Jericho lingered on the high walls long after the dust settled. Low, nervous whispers spread about what they had just seen. Some called it a mind game, a trick to scare them. But others felt a deeper dread, something shifting in the unseen world. The king of Jericho gathered his council again. This time, his advisors were utterly baffled. No attack, just an eerie display that broke every rule of war. Their panicked arguments showed the first real cracks in the city's brave front. Meanwhile, in the Israelite camp, the soldiers went back to their tents in quiet peace. The first day of the strange strategy was over, finished exactly as ordered. No one celebrated and no one debated tactics. There was only the calm rest that comes from doing what is asked. They ate their evening meal in silence. Families sat around small campfires, parents telling their children that this was unlike any battle in history.
The older generation shared memories of other times the Almighty had stepped in to do the impossible. As darkness swallowed both camps, the contrast was stark. Jericho kept sweating with nervous, sleepless energy, while the Israelite camp drifted into peaceful rest, trusting their unseen guide, a rest that thick stone walls could never buy. Up high, the scarlet cord in Rahab's window fluttered in the night wind, a tiny sign that even during a massive holy siege, one person still mattered. Her window looked straight out toward where the dawn would bring yet another day of the silent march. 6 days of waiting had officially begun. The second morning broke cold and still, as if the very air around Jericho had been charged with holy energy. Inside the locked city, Rahab was up long before the sun, her sleep thin and troubled by dreams of collapsing stone and sudden rescue. The red rope at her window caught the first light, a sharp splash of crimson in the dawn. Then came the sound of the horns across the plain, a familiar, haunting wail that still made her skin prickle. Her chest tightened. Each long note brought her one step closer to the promise those 2 spies had sworn to keep. She pulled her family close, their faces pale with that terrible mix of terror and fragile hope. Her old father, beaten down by a lifetime of hard labor, couldn't wrap his mind around the faith filling his daughter's chest. He looked like a man whose very world was sliding away. The local gods he had prayed to for decades were dead silent, while this desert god showed his hand with every quiet step. Her mother held the younger children tight, their small eyes looking to Rahab for answers. The kids could feel the thick tension, but Rahab's quiet face kept them still. She was their anchor in a storm they didn't understand, her belief holding them steady. Her brothers, who had laughed at her wild plans at first, now watched the walls with growing dread. Every morning proved that this god was nothing like the idols of Canaan. The heavy silence of that army was louder than any battle cry. From her small window, Rahab watched the life of her city slowly rot away day by day. The market stalls opened late, shopkeepers moving like ghosts. In the dusty streets below, all talk had turned hushed, frantic, and desperately urgent. This long wait felt like a physical weight on every shoulder. By the 3rd day, the people of Jericho had begun to break. Some families hoarded food and water, preparing for a months-long siege. Others gave up on normal life entirely, spending their days in the temples, begging gods who remained stubbornly silent. Jericho's priests worked frantically to stay relevant in a crisis they simply could not understand. Rituals and sacrifices continued growing more desperate by the hour. Those seeking guidance left with the same questions they brought. No comfort remained. On the 4th day, children began copying the strange procession in their play. They marched around their homes copying the Israelites until terrified parents shut the games down. Watching their own kids mimic the enemy was too painful. It forced them to face fears no one dared name. The king called daily council meetings, but the debates just went in circles, leading nowhere as the hours slipped away. War strategies were proposed and discarded. Peace talks were considered and immediately rejected. This bizarre siege left leaders completely lost, facing a threat with no precedent. By the 5th day, the mental strain was cracking the city's unity. Neighbors eyed each other with suspicion. Rumors spread like wildfire. Each story was wilder than the last. Some claimed to see angels walking with the Israelite soldiers. Others heard voices whispering from the stone walls. Local merchants, the very backbone of Jericho's economy, watched their world collapse. Trade routes that had flourished for generations were cut off. Former trade routes seemed completely irrelevant under this divine siege. The riches that once defined their high status now held absolutely zero value against forces beyond human understanding. Rahab watched these changes with a heavy heart, but also with hope. The neighbors she had known her entire life
were now paralyzed by the same dread gripping the surrounding nations. Still, she alone held a sacred promise of safety. This covenant came directly from the Hebrew scouts she had fed and hidden. By day 6, the tension inside Jericho was nearly impossible to bear. The marching was familiar now, yet it felt heavier with each passing day. Those constant trumpet blasts seemed to pierce deep into the souls of everyone listening, stirring up deep terrors and unvoiced hopes. Families inside the stone walls huddled closer together. As time dragged on, parents simply could not find the right words to comfort their young ones. Simple, innocent questions pierced right through the adults' fragile attempts at logical explanations, exposing the raw anxiety beneath their fake composure. Inside the temples, priests offered increasingly complex sacrifices, hoping sheer volume would force their gods to answer. But with each passing day, the silence from heaven grew more crushing. Cold stone statues offered zero comfort to desperate worshippers. The military guards stationed along the massive walls grew extremely restless as the week wore on. They were trained for standard battle, for enemies attacking with swords and spears. But that silent, orderly march below them created a mental strain unlike anything they had ever faced in battle. By the end of the 6th day, even Jericho's most optimistic citizens felt the heavy weight of approaching doom. The air itself felt heavy and thick with expectation, as if the land was holding its breath for something unprecedented. Those massive walls that had protected them for generations suddenly felt less like a defense and more like a cage, trapping them inside a doomed city. All through that 6th night, Rahab checked and rechecked the scarlet cord hanging from her window. Her family gathered close to her, their faces reflecting the tense mix of fear and hope that had become their constant reality. Tomorrow's sunrise would bring the 7th day and the completion of a promise that would change everything. Darkness fell over Jericho like a heavy shroud, carrying their approaching doom. Inside the massive walls, peaceful sleep was impossible. Morning would bring either rescue or absolute ruin, and that choice belonged to a God whose ways were far beyond human understanding. The 7th day arrived. Dawn on that 7th morning broke with a strange, beautiful light, unlike any day before. The sky burned with color, washing Jericho's massive walls in gold and scarlet tones, as if creation itself was bracing for the climactic moment about to reshape this ancient land. Behind the walls, the people woke with the nervous energy of those who know their lives hang in the balance. Before the sun rose, Rahab took her place at the window, her fingers tightly clutching the scarlet cord that had become her lifeline. The thread felt warm to the touch, almost pulsing with the same nervous energy running through her own veins. Around her, family members huddled together in the small room that was now their only sanctuary. Their faces mirrored the growing dread and expectation that had mounted day by day. Noise from the Israelite camp carried across the plains with absolute clarity, as if the air had been cleared specifically to carry the sacred music. Today's preparations were vastly different from all previous days, marked by an intensity that pointed to an ending. The ram's horns, meant to sound the final signal, were carefully prepared. Their blast would soon join a chorus destined to echo down through history. The first lap began with the exact same solemn grace of the previous 6 days. Armed soldiers marched forward in perfect order, their bronze armor catching the morning sun flashing like mirrors in the early light. Behind them, 7 priests raised their horns, and the haunting melody that had become the sound of Jericho's final week began to play, casting its spell once more. The Ark of the Covenant moved with the crowd like a beating heart, turning the entire march into an act of worship. The Levites carrying it walked with the slow, heavy steps of men bearing heaven's weight. Their reverence was clear in every single movement. The rear guard followed,
closing the circle of divine power that surrounded the sacred ark.
As the procession finished its first lap, guards on the walls of Jericho realized something was different today. The army did not retreat to their camp like before. Instead, they kept marching around the city, starting a second lap that sent waves of unease through the defenders. The familiar rhythm was breaking. With it went any illusion of safety the people still held. Yet this second lap moved with the exact same steady pace. Yet the tension seemed to rise with every step. The third lap brought anxious whispers from the high walls. These quiet whispers died away as the horns blew with more urgency. During the fourth lap, citizens began crowding into the streets, drawn by some deep instinct they had to see what was coming. Inside her home, Rahab's family huddled closer as the fifth lap began, keeping their eyes locked on the scarlet cord. Even the youngest children felt the weight of the moment without truly understanding. Their small hands reached toward the red fabric, their single symbol of hope. The adults spoke only in whispers. Their quiet words sounded like solemn prayers offered to a God they were only just beginning to know. A heavy silence fell over the city during the sixth lap. Even the dogs seemed to sense the change. Their usual barking was replaced by a strange, waiting quiet. Merchants left their shops and soldiers abandoned their posts. Even the priests stepped out from their temples. Some powerful force drew everyone toward the outer walls, where everything was about to change. The seventh lap began under the midday sun. Its bright light beat down on ancient walls that had survived countless storms. But these stones had never faced a force like this. Below, the Hebrew army marched on with the same quiet, steady discipline. Still, the air felt thick with a strange, heavy pressure, a building power that made the very stones seem to vibrate. Near the end of the seventh lap, Joshua raised his hand and the marching army stopped. The heavy footsteps died away, leaving only the haunting sound of 7 ram horns piercing the quiet. The moment hung like a suspended breath. It felt as though all creation was waiting for the single word that would release a week of building power. Then came the command, roaring like thunder from the heavens. Joshua ordered the people to shout, and 30,000 voices answered as one. The roar that rose from the camp was unlike anything heard since the dawn of time. Thousands of human voices merged into a single terrifying wave of sound. A cry of pure faith built to move mountains and shatter stone. The earth itself seemed to shudder under the weight of that massive shout. Jericho's high walls, standing for generations as symbols of human strength, began to tremble, as if made of sand, not solid stone. The massive blocks, once fitted so tightly, started pulling apart. Then came the crash, a sound like thunder but deeper and heavier than any storm. The great walls that had protected Jericho for centuries crumbled like dry clay. The ruin was so complete, it was as if they had never stood at all. Massive clouds of dust choked the air, blocking the sun and turning the bright day into a twilight of judgment. Yet in the middle of this total ruin, one small section of the wall stood tall. Rahab's house, marked by the scarlet cord fluttering in the breeze, remained completely untouched. The promise made by the spies had been kept in the most striking way imaginable. Her faith was rewarded with survival, while the entire city crumbled to dust around her. Then came a deep, heavy silence. Only dust drifted on the cold, quiet wind. The impossible had actually happened. God's promise was fulfilled. The city that seemed unbeatable now lay in ruins. The years of wandering were finally over. The time of inheritance had begun. As Rahab watched the dust slowly settled over the ruins of Jericho, revealing a world changed forever. Where massive walls had stood just moments before, only scattered stones remained, their ancient strength shattered by the power of God. Through the smoking ruins, 2 young men made their way.
They scanned the destruction, searching for the one home where they had sworn a sacred oath.
The spies chosen for this rescue carried the weight of their promise. These were the very men who had eaten at Rahab's table, who had slept under her roof, and who had given their word of honor. They swore she and her family would live when judgment fell on the city. Now that scarlet cord hung like a beacon of hope amidst the wreckage. The single stretch of wall holding her home stood like a monument to God's protection. Its stones were perfect while everything around them lay in ashes. The scarlet cord fluttered gently in the breeze. Its bright red thread caught the light, a banner of mercy in a field of judgment. Seeing it brought deep relief to the two spies. Then Rahab's voice drifted out from inside the quiet home, filled with a mixture of joy and terror after witnessing the impossible. She heard the approaching footsteps and knew her moment of rescue had finally arrived. Her family crowded close, their faces wide with the shock of people who had watched their world fall apart while staying perfectly safe in their tiny refuge. The soldiers climbed carefully over the ruins of what used to be Jericho's main street, approaching the marked house with quiet respect. The stark contrast between the total ruin outside and the untouched home was a powerful reminder of how precisely God's judgment had fallen. Then the heavy door opened. Rahab looked out, her eyes shining with tears of relief and gratitude. The promise that had kept her going through days of terrifying waiting was finally kept. The God of Israel kept his word. Every single detail of the promise sworn by his scouts had been honored. As the family stepped from the ruins, they showed what mercy looks like. Once marked for death, faith had saved them. Rahab's parents, her siblings, and the relatives who trusted her desperate choice now stood in the light, alive, while neighbors lay crushed in the ruins. The Hebrew soldiers spoke to them gently. They carried the quiet authority of men serving a living God. They promised safe passage, guaranteed their survival, and offered them a permanent home among the tribes of Israel. A pact made in a dark room was now honored in broad daylight. They began their walk from Rahab's shattered home toward the Hebrew camp. The soldiers walked slowly, guiding them with care. They knew this family had just watched their entire world turn to dust. Their faces showed a quiet clash of relief and grief. Even in safety, the heavy weight of God's judgment hung over them. Clambering over piles of shattered stone, Rahab's family saw the true scale of the ruin. Ancient homes were now just piles of gravel. The busy marketplace was buried under tons of fallen brick. The temples of their old gods were nothing but scattered stone. Ahead, the Hebrew camp waited. They welcomed the survivors with deep respect. Joshua himself stepped forward to meet Rahab, his lined face showing the relief of a promise kept and the heavy awareness of what this survival had cost her. The Hebrew general spoke to her with deep, formal gratitude, assuring her that the bravery she showed in hiding his spies would never be forgotten. Her radical faith, proven by risking her very life for their God, bought her an honorable place among this new nation. Tents were quickly set up for her family in a quiet corner of the camp, giving them a fresh start. Leaders chose this spot with extreme care, close enough to join daily life, but far enough to give them room to grieve and heal from the shock. The Hebrew families welcomed them. They knew what it meant to be foreigners in a strange land. Elders remembered their own decades of slavery in Egypt. They saw their own past mirrored in Rahab's family, that same mix of wild hope and fear. Food was brought, bread, roasted meat. This simple supper became a sacred covenant feast. Sharing bread bound their families together for generations to come. Drinking from the same wells sealed a shared destiny. It had begun the moment Rahab trusted their God. Soon the children took the first steps toward building friendships across a deep cultural divide. Laughter and simple games quickly broke through the language barrier, while the adults built the trust that turned strangers into family. twilight fell, the hard truth of their new life settled in. The past, dead. Buried under the smashed walls of Jericho, a strange future lay ahead, full of mysteries they could barely imagine and trials they had yet to face. They carefully packed away the scarlet cord that had saved them. It was far too precious to be left behind with the ashes of their past. This simple red rope was now a physical proof of God's keeping power, a treasure to hand down to their children. News of Rahab's bold faith spread quickly, bringing hope to everyone who heard her story. She had risked everything on mere rumors of a great God, choosing the unknown over her comfortable past, and was rescued far beyond her wildest hopes. The two spies she had hidden came by to see them, deeply relieved to see her alive and well. A bond born in terror and secrets had grown into a friendship that would outlast the war. The nighttime hum of the Hebrew camp wrapped around them a strange new lullaby as they lay down. Prayers and quiet songs drifted from 100 campfires, carrying a raw devotion that felt both ancient and deeply personal. These were the sounds of a people who truly knew their God. Sleep came slowly. Their minds kept racing, trying to process the impossible events of a single day. To go from a marked target in a doomed city to a survivor safe under God's wing was almost too much to believe, but the proof was right here. They were alive, safe, finally home. The next morning sunlight hit a completely transformed land, spilling over the silent ruins of Jericho. Where massive towering stone walls had stood as proud monuments to human power and protection, now lay only scattered rocks, marking what used to be the strongest fortress in the ancient world. Hebrew soldiers moved through the rubble with quiet focus, knowing they were carrying out a sacred duty. The ruin was absolute, as if some invisible hand had wiped the city away. Streets that had buzzed with trade for hundreds of years were now buried under heavy tons of stone, their very existence now only a fading memory. Joshua walked through the dust with his generals, speaking in hushed tones as they looked upon this total ruin. The man who had received the battle plan now saw its devastating end. Every single stone laid by human hands had been thrown down by a power from above, leaving a sight people would talk about for ages. Soldiers tasked with searching the ruins picked carefully through the rubble, keeping strict orders about what to take and what to leave behind. All the silver and gold, the bronze and iron, had to go straight to the treasury of the Lord. The city was doomed to absolute ruin, yet its wealth would now serve the future of the nation, claiming this land as their home. From her tent in the Hebrew camp, Rahab watched them systematically tear down everything she had ever known. The market where she bought her food lay buried under heavy clay. The streets of her childhood were lost under piles of broken stone. Even the shrines where her people once prayed to their gods were now just scattered dust. Her family stood beside her, their quiet faces reflecting the raw pain of watching their entire lives turn to ash. Relief at surviving mixed with a heavy grief for the neighbors they lost. Joy was cut short by the realization that their old world was gone forever. The children in her family struggled to understand the sheer weight of what was happening. Little ones who used to play in those streets saw them buried under tons of rock, their childhood landmarks wiped away completely. The smoking ruins stood as a stark reminder of the choice Rahab made when she first let those spies cross her threshold. The God of Israel proved to be exactly who they said he was, a creator whose power was terrifying, yet whose mercy was absolute. The surrounding Israelites watched the ruins settle, feeling their own mix of quiet awe. These desert travelers had seen God do wonders before, but the collapse of a fortress this strong was entirely new.
A new generation, born during 40 years in the wilderness, stared at their first massive victory in absolute silence. Priests who had carried the Ark of the Covenant around the walls now oversaw the gathering of silver and gold. They handled the plunder with care, knowing this wealth belonged to the Lord first and not to the hands that took it. All through the afternoon, salvage work went on in a spirit of quiet reverence instead of wild triumph. The total destruction hushed even the toughest battle-hardened soldiers. It was a stark reminder that they served a God whose vast power could never be defined by men. As the sun beat down, the thick heat brought a new smell, the choking dust of an ancient city destroyed in a single heartbeat. The heavy air felt thick with ended lives and finished stories, as centuries of history were suddenly crushed. Generations of families were flattened into a single field of debris. Handcrafted pottery lay in shattered pieces among the stones. Everyday tools lay buried under the very walls that once protected them. As evening drew near, Joshua called his commanders together. His words focused entirely on the road ahead, not on the ruins behind them. This victory was just the beginning of a long journey that would demand the exact same trust that broke these walls. The message sent by Jericho's fall would echo through the hills. Israel's God was nothing like the fragile local deities of other lands. His hand could dry up seas and level mountains. No wall made by man could hope to stand against his will. As night fell, the salvage work stopped, but the shockwaves of what happened continued to ripple through the entire region. Runners had already carried word of the sudden victory to far-off cities. They spread terror among their enemies, but gave a glimmer of hope to anyone ready to turn to this mighty Lord. That night, campfires cast long, dancing shadows that seemed to praise a victory won by faith, not weapons. Songs drifted from the tents, telling of a God who keeps his promises and rewards those who trust his voice. He could do the impossible through anyone who followed him. Near the edge of the camp, Rahab sat with her family. They were filled with deep gratitude for their lives. The bright scarlet cord that saved them lay safely packed with their few belongings. It was a physical reminder of the day her belief spared her life. Her old world was completely gone, but a new future stretched out before them full of hope they were only beginning to understand. The weeks after the battle brought fresh hardships for Rahab and her kin, demanding a quiet courage far different from before. Surviving the collapse was one thing. Now they faced the subtle struggle of finding their place among people with strange customs. Their language, diet, and worship were entirely foreign. All around them, the Israelite camp buzzed with plans for settling the land. Wandering families were finally preparing to build permanent homes and plant roots. They were changing from nomads into a nation. For Rahab's household, this was complicated. Fitting in with a group they barely knew was incredibly hard, and the language barrier was their very first hurdle. Rahab knew some Hebrew from talking to traders, but her relatives could barely manage the most basic words. Even simple requests for food or directions required wild hand gestures and endless patience, leading to painful, awkward silence. It was a constant reminder of the cultural divide. Then came Israel's religion, another massive challenge to face. The daily rhythms of worship, keeping the Sabbath, and strict laws about what could be eaten were totally foreign to people raised in Jericho's polytheistic culture. Adapting to these new ways demanded real effort from the newcomers and immense patience from their teachers. Fortunately, some Israelites welcomed them with open arms, seeing their survival as proof of God's power to change hearts and draw people from every nation to himself. These families invited Rahab's kin to share meals and slowly taught them Hebrew phrases and included them in daily life, slowly bridging the gap between stranger and neighbor. But others watched the newcomers with a cold, obvious suspicion.
The fact that these people came from Jericho, a city marked by God for total destruction, made some wonder if their conversion was real or just convenient. Whispers and sideways glances reminded Rahab that trust had to be earned, not just expected. The children adapted the fastest. Their natural flexibility let them pick up the new language and customs with incredible speed. Rahab watched in wonder as her youngest relatives started playing with the Israelite children. Their games built a bridge between cultures that adults struggled to cross. Soon the women of the camp proved incredibly helpful, teaching Rahab's female relatives the practical skills they would need for survival. Cooking methods, weaving techniques, and raising children were all vastly different from life back in Jericho. But patient teaching and gentle corrections helped them slowly master these new ways. Rahab found her own position highly complicated. Saving the Hebrew spies had given her a unique level of respect in the camp. Yet her past life as a prostitute created heavy barriers. Some looked at her with honor, knowing she had risked everything on faith, while others simply could not separate her past from her present. Learning to worship Israel's God was the hardest transition of all. The idea of a single invisible deity who could not be carved into a physical statue shattered everything they knew about the divine. And yet, the undeniable power shown in the fall of Jericho gave them a solid foundation to trust him more each day. Meanwhile, Israel's leaders worked hard to help them integrate smoothly. Joshua took a personal interest in Rahab's family. He knew their successful transition would serve as an example for any outsiders who might join Israel later. His guidance and protection helped secure their rightful place inside the community. Making a living brought new challenges because the skills and trade secrets that kept them alive in Jericho had to be adapted. Their old trade networks were gone, their Canaanite currency was completely worthless, and every business connection they had relied on was severed forever. Their temporary tent became a warm meeting place where their old life and this new world collided. They practiced Hebrew around the evening fire, sharing stories of ancient Jericho with Israelite neighbors who had never even seen a walled city. These shared moments brought them together, building deep bonds across cultural divides. Rahab's story became a powerful tool to build up faith across the camp. Her choice to risk everything based only on stories of God's wonders inspired those who struggled with doubt. Seeing her family alive and safe was tangible proof of God's faithfulness, strengthening the faith of many. Israel's annual feasts and holy days offered perfect moments to bond, as Rahab's family joined in the shared worship and joy. The Passover celebrating freedom from slavery felt incredibly personal to a family that had just survived their own terrifying escape from ruin. As weeks turned to months, the heavy walls between stranger and neighbor slowly faded. Shared daily life, helping one another in hard times, and the struggle of starting over built deep bonds that bypassed the differences in background and history that once divided them. But the change was painful. Cultural misunderstandings, religious friction, and the deep ache of leaving everything familiar behind took a heavy toll on them. Yet the quiet foundation of faith that brought them this far gave them strength for every new challenge they faced. That scarlet cord, which once marked their window for rescue, now stood as a symbol of how far they had come. No longer outsiders begging for mercy, but insiders learning to belong. Their story was being woven into the larger history of God's people. That bright cord, which once marked them for survival, was now part of their community's very life, binding them to a chosen family with ties that would last for generations. A completely new beginning. Morning light cast long shadows across the Israelite camp as Rahab stepped out into her fresh reality. All around her, the rhythms of an unfamiliar life played out. Women drew water from wells she had never seen. Children played games with rules she did not know. The language of her new neighbors flowed like a rushing river around her. In those first few days, her family huddled close together. Her mother's eyes were lined with deeper worry than ever before. Her father rarely spoke, his weathered hands clenching and unclenching as he watched the strange traditions around them. Her siblings, who once filled their home with loud laughter, now talked only in quiet whispers, utterly unsure of their place in this strange new world. The Israelites had given them a small plot of land near the camp's edge, perhaps a practical decision, close enough for protection yet far enough to keep their distance. Rahab understood this silent message. They were welcome, but they were watched. Every sunrise brought small trials, exposing the vast gulf between her old life and this new one. Even baking bread differed from her mother's ancient ways. Prayers rising at dawn and dusk followed rhythms her ears had never known. Even the stars seemed grouped differently in this place where Israel's God was praised. Yet something deeper stirred inside Rahab. It went far beyond the daily struggle of learning new ways. She felt drawn to something far greater. The faith that drove her to save those Hebrew spies now took deep root in everyday soil. She realized her escape from Jericho was only the beginning. The God who shattered giant stone walls was now building something completely new in her life. Each morning offered a choice: trust over fear, hope over despair. The scarlet cord that once marked her window now seemed to tie her soul to an eternal promise. Meanwhile, her children adapted much faster than the adults. They picked up the Hebrew tongue with ease. Soon their high voices joined in the songs of the camp. Their laughter returned. Shy at first, then growing louder as they found their place among the Israelite kids. Rahab watched them, feeling both joy and grief. Joy because they were safe with a real future ahead. Sadness because she saw how quickly they fit into a world that still felt totally foreign to her. The gap between them widened every single day. Still, the hard work of building a new life consumed her. There were skills to learn, bonds to forge, and trust to win. The Hebrew women approached her warily, their eyes filled with unasked questions. She understood their caution. She was, after all, the enemy just a short time ago. Yet, slowly, tiny acts of kindness began to cross the divide. A shared meal here, help with a heavy chore there. Children playing together forged bonds that their mothers slowly followed. The quiet, shared rhythm of daily life succeeded where formal introductions had failed. At night, when the camp grew quiet, Rahab would look up at the stars and remember the massive walls of Jericho. Her old life felt like a dream. The streets, the familiar faces, the daily routines that ruled her life had crumbled alongside the city walls. The woman who once stood at that high window watching the Hebrew army march below was slowly changing. Each passing day stripped away another layer of her past, revealing a woman she was only beginning to recognize. It was terrifying and beautiful, like watching herself be born anew. Her faith, once just a desperate gamble in a moment of sheer crisis, now became the very bedrock of her daily life. The God who had saved her was quietly reshaping her soul, her mind, and her whole understanding of what it meant to be alive. That scarlet cord from her window now lay inside a small wooden box among her few belongings. But its meaning had not faded. If anything, it ran deeper now. It was a constant reminder that salvation is more than escaping death. It is about being made new. As weeks became months, Rahab felt the first stirrings of something she never expected. A genuine sense of home. Not a home of familiar streets and faces, but a deeper home of belonging to a people and a God who claimed her as his own. This fresh start was not merely about learning to live in a new place. It was about learning to live as a completely different person. The woman who once served the pagan gods of Jericho now served Israel's God. She who once hid behind lies now walked openly in the light. She who had feared for her very life now lived in the quiet safety of divine protection. Her story was being rewritten by another hand, the hand of the God who had brought her out of darkness and into light. Every day was a fresh page in an unfinished book. The best chapters were still ahead on this path of redemption. Her transformation unfolded slowly, like a flower opening to the warm sun. Month by month, her old life faded away. In its place, something entirely new began to take root. The woman who once slipped through the dark corners of Jericho now walked openly in the light of her faith. Survival had defined her past, filled with choices made out of sheer desperation and necessity. Back then, every single day was a battle to survive in a world with few options for women like her. The streets of Jericho had been brutal teachers, and she had learned their lessons too well. But Israel's God specializes in taking broken pieces and making them whole. What once brought her shame now became a source of strength. That fierce courage that once helped her make survival choices now led her to a different kind of bravery. The courage to trust in something greater than herself. The Hebrew camp became her classroom, and daily life was her teacher. She began to pray in ways that went far beyond frantic cries for rescue. Her prayers became quiet conversations with a God who actually listened, who cared about her daily life. Soon the sacred rituals of her new community began to make sense. The animal sacrifices, the festivals, the holy days, all of it pointed to a bond that was deeply personal, yet shared by all. She wasn't simply joining a new tribe. She was embracing a whole new understanding of what it meant to be human. Her family watched her change with wonder and sometimes with worry. They saw the peace settling on her face and how her tense shoulders relaxed as the months passed. The constant survival-driven tension that had defined her years in Jericho slowly melted away, replaced by something they had never seen in her before. Simple contentment. Her long shadow of shame was finally lifting. In her new God's eyes, she was not defined by her past mistakes, but by her current faith. The woman who once felt worthless now began to see her immense value to the one who called her out of darkness. This quiet inner shift changed everything. It showed in how she walked and how she spoke to others. Even the way she greeted the morning changed, touched by the growing truth that she was chosen, not condemned. The other women in the camp began to notice. Where they once eyed her with suspicion, they now came with curiosity. Whispers of her story drifted from tent to tent, bringing quiet hope to others who carried their own heavy regrets. She became a confidant, a safe harbor where others could lay down their struggles with faith and doubt. By sharing her own path, she opened a quiet space for them to heal their own souls. The very pain that once isolated her now became a bridge to others. But healing was slow. It never happens overnight. Some days brought sharp reminders of her old life that stung like open wounds. Memories would rise up out of nowhere, carrying the heavy weight of choices she desperately wished she could undo. Yet even these dark moments found a place in her redemption. She learned to hand those memories over to God, letting them form the bedrock of her new life. The scars remained, yes, but they no longer told her who she was. They were living proof that grace can rebuild the most ruined places. Her understanding of forgiveness grew deeper than she ever thought possible. She used to think forgiving meant forgetting, but she learned it was something much deeper. It meant transformation. Her past was not erased. It was redeemed, given a completely new purpose. The woman who once hid spies in her home now hid nothing from her Creator. She brought her entire self, past, present, and future, into the warmth of His love.
There she found acceptance instead of judgment, and mercy instead of anger. Her life became a clear reflection of the God she now served. This was a God who did not demand perfection, but offered transformation. His love did not depend on her being worthy, it made her worthy. The scarlet cord that once marked her window for rescue now seemed to define her whole life.
She was a woman marked by grace, chosen not for ruin, but for restoration. Her story became part of a much larger story being quietly woven. As the seasons changed, she did too. The outcast who once feared the judgment of others now stood secure in God's love. The woman who once hid in the dark now walked in the light. The one who used to define herself by her failures now found her identity in faith. Her rescue was not just personal, it was prophetic. She was living proof that no one is beyond the reach of grace. No past is ever too dark to be touched by the light. Her life was a promise that redemption is real for anyone who trusts the Creator who makes all things new. But her path was not over yet. Still, her destination was certain. She was finally becoming the woman she was always meant to be. Not by ignoring her past, but by watching it transform into something beautiful. And then there was Salmon. The very first time Rahab saw him, he was teaching a group of young men the law of Moses. His voice carried across the camp with the quiet strength of someone who knew God deeply. She paused her work, drawn in by the gentle power of his words and the deep respect of his listeners. Salmon belonged to the tribe of Judah, with a family line of faithful men. His name carried real weight in the camp, and his reputation for wisdom was built on years of integrity. He was exactly the kind of noble leader who should have kept his distance from a woman like Rahab. Yet something stirred in his soul when he first heard about her. The story of the woman who sheltered the Hebrew spies, who risked everything to trust the God of Israel, captured his thoughts in ways that surprised him. He found himself deeply drawn to this outsider's remarkable faith. Their first meeting happened by accident, or perhaps by divine design. Rahab was drawing water when her clay jar slipped, spilling the precious liquid into the dirt. Salmon happened to be walking past, and he stepped in to help her pick it up. For a brief second, their eyes met over that simple act of kindness. She fully expected him to turn and walk away without a word. After all, she knew what people said about her. But instead, he stayed, asking kindly about her family and how they were adjusting to their new lives. His voice held no judgment, and she found herself opening up to him more than she ever had with anyone else. Those brief meetings grew into longer conversations. He began to look for her in the quiet of the evening when the camp finally settled down. They walked along the edge of the camp, talking about faith, the God who had guided them both, and the mysteries of his plans. Salmon was unlike any man she had ever known. While the men of Jericho were driven by lust and pride, he was led by something deeper. His devotion was not a heavy burden, but a joy that lit up his entire face. He spoke of God not as some distant force, but as a father caring for the details of their lives. Gradually, she began to see herself differently. No longer just a woman marked by shame, but one defined by grace. His respect for her story and courage slowly began to heal deep wounds she had carried for so long she had forgotten they were even there. Soon the other women noticed, and some began to whisper, "A respected man of Judah should not be seen with someone like Rahab." Yet others watched with hope, wondering if something beautiful might grow from this unlikely pair. Salmon's family watched this growing bond with deep concern. They spoke to him in private, reminding him of his standing, his duty, and his future. But they also knew their son. They knew the depth of his faith and his wisdom, so they watched and they waited, trusting God to lead.
For Rahab, this growing love was both beautiful and terrifying. She had never known a love that wasn't transactional, one that didn't demand a price. Salmon's love felt like a free gift with no strings attached and no debt to pay. She found herself changing in ways that had nothing to do with trying to prove she was worthy of him. Just having him there created a quiet, safe harbor, a place where she could heal, grow strong, and become the woman God was calling her to be. His faith anchored hers. His quiet peace steadied her soul. By any cultural standard, their courtship was completely unconventional. They were both outsiders in their own way. She by birth, he by choice. Yet they found a kindred spirit in each other, someone who understood how hard it was to follow God in a world that rewarded very different things. They did not rush into marriage. They both knew the whispers that would follow them, the sideways glances, and the hard road their future children might have to walk. But they knew something deeper. They belonged together. Their bond was blessed by the same God who had pulled them both out of the dark and into the light. Their wedding was simple, but deeply sacred. A few family members stood as witnesses as they bound their lives to each other and to the God they served. That bright red cord which had once hung from Rahab's window to save her family now felt like a quiet seal on a holy union. Their marriage became a living picture of what God's radical grace actually looks like. Here was a love that crossed hard boundaries, ignored society's rules, and proved that God's mercy is open to absolutely anyone who welcomes it. Their quiet devotion joined the larger story of God's love for humanity. The life they built day by day was full of simple, peaceful joys. Salmon gave Rahab a sense of safety she had never known. In return, her raw, tested faith gave him a fresh, deep look at what grace really means. Together, they became stronger than they ever were alone. Their home became a welcoming place for outcasts and strangers, offering shelter to anyone who needed to be loved for who they were, far beneath the surface of their past mistakes. Their marriage was its own sermon, a quiet proof that redemption can rewrite any life and open doors that once seemed locked forever. In the quiet of the evening, Rahab would sometimes stop and wonder at the winding path that had brought her here. From the crumbling walls of Jericho to the arms of a husband who loved her completely. Only God's grace could do this. A God who specializes in turning broken lives into stories of beauty, a royal lineage began. The child growing inside her carried the weight of two different worlds, part Canaanite, part Israelite. He would be a bridge between his mother's painful past and his father's heritage. As Rahab felt those first quiet stirs of life, she knew this baby was more than just a child of her love with Salmon. He was part of a massive plan stretching far beyond her own sight. When Boaz was finally born, the midwives noticed how strong he was and how a quiet peace seemed to settle over him. Rahab held him close, her mind drifting back to that red cord on her window. Now she held a different kind of thread, a living, breathing link in a holy chain of promise that would tie her life to the greatest story ever told. His name Boaz meant, "In him is strength." And even as a little boy, he seemed to live out those words completely. He grew strong in body and soul, soaking up his parents' faith like a tree drinking in the sun. His mother's stories of mercy and his father's words from the law of Moses shaped how he saw the world and his place in it. As the boy grew, Rahab saw her part in God's plan more clearly. Escaping the ruins of Jericho wasn't just about saving her own skin, it was about keeping a sacred bloodline alive, making sure her son would be born to carry something eternal into the future. Boaz learned about his mother's past early on, not as a source of shame, but as a miracle to wonder at. She told him about the secret spies, the falling stone walls, and the God who saved them from the ruin.
She wanted him to know his very life was living proof of God's deep mercy. Salmon taught his boy the promises God made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He showed him how their household was now stitched into that grand vow, how their family would help bring salvation to the whole world. The boy listened with wide eyes, trying to grasp the weight of the destiny laid out before him. As the years passed, Boaz grew into a highly respected leader in Israel. He carried his mother's fierce courage and his father's unwavering integrity in everything he did. He rose as a leader in Bethlehem, famous for his honest business dealings and his kindness to the poor. When Boaz met Ruth, the Moabite widow who had traveled to Israel with her mother-in-law Naomi, he saw something that reminded him of his mother's own path. Here was an outsider who had chosen to throw her lot in with the God of Israel, another foreigner finding a home among God's people. Their connection held deep echoes of his parents' own love story. Once more, boundaries collapsed, expectations were shattered, and grace won over prejudice. When Boaz and Ruth finally married, they carried on the redeeming work started by Rahab and Salmon. Ruth gave birth to a son named Ehud, which means servant. He would grow up to father Jesse, who fathered David, the young shepherd boy who would become the most legendary king in Israel's history. The line started by Rahab's raw faith would eventually bloom on the throne of King David. Rahab even lived to see her grandson born. Looking down at his tiny face, she saw a piece of the future God had been building. She knew now her story was never just about saving herself. It had always been about something far larger. Her faith became a cornerstone, supporting the very foundation of God's coming kingdom. The woman who once leaned from her window in Jericho to watch the army of Israel march past could never have imagined her great-great-grandson would one day command those very troops. That scarlet cord marking her for survival had somehow grown into a royal lineage destined to bring hope to the entire world. King David, the leader who would unite Israel and make Jerusalem the city of God, carried the blood of Rahab in his veins. The psalms he would compose, the battles he would win, the kingdom he would build, all of it stretched back to the faith of an outsider who chose to trust the God of Israel. But this lineage did not stop with David. Through his descendants, the ancient promise pressed steadily forward, reaching across centuries toward an even greater moment. The family tree rooted in Rahab's quiet faith would eventually produce the son of David, the Messiah, the Savior of the world. The family line that Matthew would eventually write down included 4 specific women: Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and Bathsheba. Each had a unique story of hard-won redemption. But Rahab's name stood out as the pioneer who proved no background could ever keep someone from being a part of God's design. Later, in the quiet years of her life, Rahab would sit and ponder the sheer mystery of it all. Born in a pagan city, her life had once seemed to lead nowhere, surrounded by death. Yet the God who saved her also chose to use her, making her a vital part of a story that echoes through eternity. Her own child became part of the royal line of kings. Far more than that, he entered the lineage of the King of Kings. Her faith had done so much more than save her. It played a vital part in saving the world. The crimson cord that once hung from her window had grown into a central thread in the unfolding story of redemption. Looking back, she could clearly trace God's hand moving through every single chapter of her life. From those spies who first showed up at her door to the grandchildren who now carried the promise forward, every piece fit into a larger design that was both beautiful and mysterious. Her legacy would never be measured in gold or silver or in worldly power and status, but in the faith of her children and the unchanging character of her God. She was a mother of kings, a matriarch in the kingdom of God, a living proof of grace to reshape broken lives and write beautiful endings. This was her legacy of faith. As the years went by, silver touched Rahab's hair, and deep lines of wisdom marked her eyes. She became the matriarch, a keeper of sacred memory. In the quiet evenings, once the day's chores were finally finished, children and grandchildren gathered close around her, eager to hear the stories of their family heritage. Her voice had grown soft with age, but her memory remained sharp. She still remembered every detail of the night those spies first knocked on her door, every word of the promise they made, and every moment of fear and faith that had guided her family to safety. But looking back across all those years, she understood that these memories did not belong to her alone. They belonged to everyone who would come after. Her simple act of sheltering those spies had grown into something far larger than she could have ever imagined. It became a family inheritance passed carefully down from one generation to the next, like a priceless treasure. Every child who heard her story received far more than just historical facts. They learned the deep truth of what it meant to trust the God of Israel. Her son Boaz took that faith and made it his own, building on it through his own life. His kindness to Ruth, his willingness to protect her, and his part in guarding the family line of David all flowed directly from the solid foundation his mother had laid. Grandchildren and great-grandchildren carried this legacy forward in their own unique ways. Some became respected leaders in the community, using their voice to protect the vulnerable and fight for justice. Others became teachers, passing down the wisdom of their ancestors. Still others served in quiet, faithful ways, simply trusting God through the normal, everyday rhythms of life. But this inheritance was never just about changing single lives. It was about shaping an entire people, a nation transformed by grace. Rahab's story became a core part of the history of Israel, proving that God refused to be boxed in by human boundaries or social divisions. Mothers struggling with their own shame whispered her name in prayer, while others spoke it aloud when telling how they had found redemption. An outsider had suddenly become a symbol of God's wide-open love. Her journey offered hope to anyone who feared their past had cut them off from a future. Trusting God when the walls of Jericho collapsed had built a faith capable of sheltering anyone from any kind of ruin. That crimson cord once marked at her window grew into a picture of the blood that would cover the hearts of all who trusted in God. Watching her descendants thrive all around her, Rahab began to realize the massive scale of what God had done through her. Her choice had done more than just save her family. It kept a bloodline safe, setting the stage for the Savior of the entire world. The little child she once rocked to sleep, the grandson she held on her knees, and the great-grandson she blessed with her aged, gentle hands, every single one of them played a part in a massive plan stretching across eternity. The prayers she learned to offer after her rescue became a deep heritage for her children. They learned to speak to the God of Israel not like strangers knocking on a foreign door, but like beloved children returning home. The deep connection with God that transformed her life had become a birthright for everyone who followed in her footsteps. Her story stood as clear proof of how a single decision can change everything. In the critical moment those spies arrived, she chose faith over fear, hope over despair, the God of Israel over the gods of her ancestors. That single choice sent ripples down through the generations. It shaped her own destiny and also the lives of countless others whose names she would never know. The legacy of faith she left behind was never just about holding on to a set of beliefs. It was about how those beliefs actually changed her daily life. She showed her children that faith without action was empty, and that true trust in God had to be lived out every day. Her descendants learned to do more than just believe in God. They lived as if that belief changed absolutely everything, to act as if their faith made a real difference in the world around them. The stories she shared in those quiet evening hours were never just entertainment. Every child who heard about the scarlet cord learned that they too could rest safe in God's protection. Every grandchild who listened to the story of the falling walls came to understand that no barrier was too big for their God. Her legacy was also about a deep sense of welcome. She was a foreigner who became family, an outsider who became absolutely essential, a woman once carrying a heavy past who became a highly honored ancestor. Her story proved that God's love is open to anyone, no matter where they start or what they have done. The faith that started as a desperate gamble had grown into a quiet, settled trust. The woman who once hid behind lies and secrets had become a guiding light for others. A life that once seemed headed for complete ruin had somehow become a wellspring of hope for generations still unborn. As she prepared to pass from this world into the next, Rahab could look back with quiet contentment at the faith she had built and the legacy she was passing down to the ones who followed. Her children and grandchildren would carry on both her features and her deep devotion, keeping not just her name alive, but her total loyalty to the God who saved them. The scarlet cord that once hung from her window for safety had become a golden thread woven deep into the grand design of God's rescue. Her faith was now a key chapter in the endless story of His love for mankind, a story that would keep unfolding long after her own life was over. Sometimes, in the quiet hush before sleep, she would whisper the very same prayer she first learned after her rescue. "Thank you, God of Israel, for choosing me, for saving me, and for using my life." And in the deep stillness that followed, she could almost hear that prayer echoing back from voices not yet born, from descendants not yet conceived, and from children of faith who would carry her legacy far into a future she would never see. This is Rahab in the scriptures. Centuries rolled by after Rahab fell silent, yet her name refused to fade. The woman who once leaned from her window in Jericho to watch Israel's army pass below had become far more than a figure from ancient history. She became a lasting symbol, a living picture of God's grace that would speak to generations who had not yet drawn their very first breath. When the biblical writers began writing down the family line of Jesus, they faced a choice. They could easily have listed only the names of men following the usual custom of ancient Jewish genealogies. But something moved them to include 5 women instead, and right there among them was Rahab. In the Gospel of Matthew, her life became forever linked to the greatest story ever told. This was incredibly rare for several reasons. Most family lists back then only traced the fathers and sons, treating women as little more than vessels to pass a name from one generation to the next. Yet here in the most important family line ever put on paper, Rahab's name sits right beside Tamar, Ruth, Sheba, and Mary. These were women whose stories of faith and change were key to truly understanding who God is. She was not some minor footnote or an afterthought. She was an essential part of the story. She is named as the mother of Boaz and the grandmother of Obed, the great-grandmother of Jesse, and the great-great-grandmother of King David. Her faith was laid like a cornerstone in the very foundation of the Messiah's line. But the New Testament writers were not satisfied with just mentioning her name once in a list. They wanted to dig into the deeper meaning of her journey and what her faith showed about God's plan. So her name appears again in the letter to the Hebrews, right in the famous section known as the Hall of Faith. Right there alongside giants like Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, and King David, Rahab's name found its rightful place. The author wrote that, by faith, Rahab the prostitute did not die with the disobedient because she had welcomed the spies with peace. Her faith was held up as an example to follow, a model of what it really looks like to trust God when everything around you is dangerous and uncertain. The text is completely honest about her past, calling her Rahab the prostitute, but it is just as clear about what her life became. Faith changed everything. The woman once defined by her work was now defined solely by her belief. The woman once known for her shame was now famous for her rescue. James, the brother of Jesus, also used her story to show exactly how faith and action work together. He wrote that Rahab the prostitute was proven right with God by her actions when she welcomed the messengers and sent them out another way. Her faith was made real by what she actually did. Her belief was proven by her actions, and his words point to something incredibly important. It is simply not enough to agree with facts about God in your mind. True faith has to show itself in the real world. Rahab's faith drove her to risk everything to shelter those spies. She put her trust in the God of Israel, even though it meant turning her back on her own city. Her story shows us how faith works in the lives of normal, everyday people. She was not a priest or a prophet, nor did she hold any religious power or moral standing. She was just a woman with a difficult past who made a life-altering choice at the perfect moment. And the New Testament writers seem to take real joy in that fact. Here was a foreign woman, a prostitute from a pagan city who became a direct ancestor of the Messiah. Her life proved that God's grace reaches anyone, no matter where they come from or what they have done. Her faith became a bridge between the Old and New Testaments, a real bridge between the God who rescued Israel from Egypt and the God saving the world through Christ. The very same mercy that pulled her from the collapsing walls of Jericho would later pull all of humanity away from the grip of sin and death. That bright red rope in her window did more than save her household. It pointed straight to the blood that would cover the cross to rescue the whole world. Her life pointed directly to the ultimate proof of love, a sacrifice that offered a fresh start to anyone willing to put their trust in God. For hundreds of years, teachers and preachers have kept coming back to Rahab as a wellspring of hope and strength. People still speak her name in churches everywhere, holding up her deep trust as proof of what can happen when you actually believe in a God who can do anything. And for anyone carrying heavy shame from their past, her story is a lifeline. If God could take a prostitute from a doomed city and put her in the Messiah's own family tree, then nobody is out of reach. She became living proof that people can change, that forgiveness is real, and that fresh starts are not just for people who never messed up. A woman who once hid behind the stone walls of Jericho had turned into a beacon in the dark, offering hope to everyone who felt abandoned or lost. Her story became scripture, her faith became a guide, her name a total blessing. In the New Testament, Rahab's journey makes complete sense. She was never just some local woman who helped two spies slip away unnoticed. She actually played a part in the greatest rescue mission of all time. Her fierce belief became part of the very bedrock of the church. Her own quiet bravery joined a larger courage that would change history forever. That red rope, which once saved her family from the sword, became a vital thread in God's massive plan to rescue the entire world. Now she was stitched into the endless tale of God's love for us, a narrative that is still being written today and will be until the end of time. Think about that red cord. The rope hanging from Rahab's window was never just a convenient marker to tell the soldiers which house to leave alone. It carried a deep meaning, a link tying her survival to God's bigger rescue plan. Wrapped up in those cheap, simple fibers were truths that would echo down through history, speaking directly to anyone desperately searching for a way out. The color itself had a heavy, deep significance. Red, the color of living blood, of ultimate sacrifice, of raw passion and power. When Rahab tied that rope to her window frame, she was stepping, without even realizing it, into a visual language God had been using since the dawn of time. That red cord echoed an older moment, when a splash of red marked a house for safety. Back in Egypt, centuries before Rahab was even born, Hebrew families had painted their wooden doorposts with lamb's blood so the angel of death would pass over them. The very same God who saved Israel through the blood of a lamb was now saving Rahab through this single red rope.
But this was about more than just a color. That cord was a lifeline. It was a bridge between her old life and her new one, hanging between complete ruin and total rescue, between certain death and a brand new life. When Rahab let those two spies slide down the outer wall, she was literally helping them escape, but spiritually, she was carving out a path to her own salvation. The rope proved that faith can build bridges where there were absolutely none before. It linked a pagan Canaanite woman to the true God of Israel, a woman with a shameful past to a holy promise, a complete outsider to the family of faith. Twisted into those cheap fibers were the ideas of welcome and acceptance that would eventually define the whole gospel. Even the window she chose carried its own weight. Windows are openings. They let the light in, acting as the spot where the inside world meets the outside. Rahab's window was where she sat watching the approaching Hebrew army, seeing God's raw power in action. Now that same frame became her doorway to survival. That red rope whispered of God's grace. It looked thin, almost fragile, as if it would snap under any real pressure. But it held. It shows us that God's rescue doesn't depend on how hard we try or how clever our plans are. The most basic act of trust, just reaching out a hand toward God, was more than enough to keep her safe. Those specific rules the spies gave her about the rope showed even more. The cord had to stay tied in the window, completely visible to anyone passing by. This rescue wasn't meant to be kept secret. It demanded a public stand, a clear commitment, and openly choosing sides with the people of God. The rope also required her to gather her whole family under its shelter. Safety was never meant to be a solo project. Rahab's belief cast a protective shadow, not just over her, but over every single relative huddled beneath that bright red rope. It shows how one person's faith can shield an entire household, how one brave soul shields a community. Even the rope's raw flax, the same plant used to weave holy linen, connected her to the priest's garments, the curtains of the holy tabernacle, and the linen shroud that would later wrap the body of Christ. Even as a simple tool used to slide runaways down a tall wall, it whispered of holy things, pointing to a sacred setting apart. Tying that rope in her window forced Rahab to make a real choice. She had to decide whether to trust the promise of those two strangers and if she truly believed in their God, and whether she would gamble her life on the hope of rescue. That rope became her faith made visible, a physical proof of her trust in a God she couldn't see. For generations, people have looked at that red cord and seen a picture of the cross. Just like that rope marked her house for survival, the blood of Jesus would mark those who put their trust in him for eternity. Much like that cord was on display for the incoming army, the cross would be lifted up for the whole world to witness. And just like that rope spared her family from the ruin of Jericho, the cross would rescue God's children from the grip of sin and death. That cord pointed forward to other crimson threads woven deep into Holy Scripture. Like the crimson thread tied to Zerah's hand at birth, marking him as the firstborn twin. Or the red heifer, whose ashes were used for purification. And the scarlet wool used to cleanse those healed from leprosy. Each of these red threads seemed to call out to one another, forming a pattern of redemption written in colors and signs. This quiet truth that the cord's memory was preserved suggests God wanted this symbol to teach future generations. So the story was passed from parent to child, from teacher to student, written down by scribes and kept safe in sacred scripture. The cord became a powerful teaching tool, a way to show the meaning of salvation to those who came next. In ancient Jewish thought, the scarlet cord became linked with the thread of life, connecting people to their divine purpose. It showed the bond between God and those who seek his shelter. The cord that rescued Rahab became a symbol of the covenant that protects everyone who trusts.
Later Christian teachers found in this simple cord a sign pointing to the scarlet thread running through the entire New Testament. The theme of salvation through sacrifice of life, rising from death of redemption coming through sacrifice. That cord in Rahab's window pointed straight to the cross on Calvary. It also brought hope to people who felt their lives were barely holding together, hanging by nothing more than a thin thread. Just as Rahab's slender cord was strong enough to lower the spies safely to the ground, God's grace is strong enough to hold you secure, no matter how fragile your life feels right now. Over time, the scarlet cord became a beautiful symbol of God's protection in art and literature. Artists painted it glowing against the dark stone of Jericho's walls, a single line of hope cutting through a scene of ruin. Writers used it to show the thin, unbreakable connection between heaven and earth, between human need and divine supply. The cord reminded everyone who thought about it that salvation often comes through the most ordinary things. It wasn't forged from gold crafted by masters or blessed in some grand ceremony. It was just a common piece of rope. Yet in God's hands, the ordinary became something extraordinary. The simple was made sacred, and the ordinary was more than enough. This story brought comfort to anyone wondering if their faith was truly enough, their resources adequate, or their place with God secure. The cord declared that salvation does not depend on our perfection, but on His promise, not on our strength, but on His faithfulness. The cord that once marked a single window in a doomed city now marks the hearts of believers throughout history. It spoke of a God who could be trusted to keep His word, a God who would honor faith even when the world calls it foolishness, and who provides rescue in the darkest moments. In the end, the scarlet cord became far more than a symbol. It was a visible sign pointing to an invisible holy grace. It pointed straight to the heart of God, to His deep love, and to the promise of redemption that would find its perfect end in the sacrifice of the Savior. The woman who tied that cord to her window could never have imagined the deep meaning it would carry for centuries, the generations it would reach, or the hope it would bring. Yet God knew, and that cord became part of the language of love that speaks across time to every heart reaching out for rescue. Now let us consider the deeper meaning. Rahab's story opens a window into the mysteries of God and human destiny. Her journey is a lens for examining the beauty of grace, exploring the meaning of faith, and standing in wonder at redemption. As she moved from the walls of Jericho into the family line of Christ, we find truths that challenge our assumptions and expand how we see God moving in our world. Her life reveals a God who loves to choose the unexpected. Human wisdom might have picked someone noble with a spotless reputation to play a major role in history, but God chose a prostitute from a condemned city. That decision shows us something essential about how His grace works. It is not based on what we deserve, but on His mercy. This truth reaches far beyond saving just one person. It shows us how God builds His kingdom. Throughout Scripture, we see this pattern over and over. The younger brother chosen over the elder, the weak defeating the strong, and simple things silencing the wise. By placing Rahab in the family line of Jesus, God sets this rule from the very start. Her faith shows a beautiful mystery, the meeting of God's power and human choice. The God who planned Jericho's fall still honored Rahab's decision to beg for His mercy. Her decision mattered. Her faith carried real weight. Her choice changed everything. This tells us that God's power does not wipe out our choices, but actually gives us room to act. Mercy for Rahab during Jericho's fall shows the depth of God's justice. He is never random in how He gives blessings or judgment, yet His ways refuse to be boxed in by our narrow ideas of fairness. The same holiness that judged Jericho also made a way of escape for anyone willing to trust His shelter. Her story shines a light on both the depth of human sin and the endless reach of God's grace. Rahab was no worse than the people of Jericho, but she was no better either. What set her apart was not her morals, but her willingness to trust the God of Israel. This shows that salvation is open to everyone, not because we have earned it, but because God offers it freely to everyone who will take it. Her shift from outcast to insider shows how divine grace builds a fresh start. She was not just forgiven for her past, God gave her a whole new life to live. The woman once called Rahab the prostitute became Rahab the faithful. Rahab, mother of kings. Rahab, the example of trust. Grace does not just wipe the slate clean, it reshapes the old lines and gives them a different purpose. Her spot in the family tree of Jesus reveals something deep about the Savior who came from her line. This was a king who was not ashamed of the broken pieces in his ancestry. He welcomed into his own family those whom the respectable world turned away. That lineage shouts that hope belongs to everyone, no matter where they started or what heavy baggage they carry. Keeping her story in Holy Scripture reveals what God values most. He wanted all future generations to know Rahab by name, to study her life, and to find hope in her change. Her account was never just history, it was a deep lesson in faith. It was not just a biography, it showed the very heart of God. Her trust proves that faith does not require you to understand everything first. Rahab had no copy of the law of Moses, no education in Hebrew theology, and no years of religious training. Yet her basic trust in what she heard about the God of Israel was enough. Faith, her life reminds us, is not about knowing all the right answers. It is about offering absolute trust. The courage she showed by hiding those spies shows what real faith looks like on the ground. True belief always leads to action, sometimes action that is highly dangerous and puts your reputation and very life on the line. Her life insists that faith without action is empty. Trust in God must show up in how we actually live. Her welcome into Israel points toward a time when all nations would join God's family. Long before the Apostle Paul wrote about outsiders being grafted into the community of faith, Rahab was already living that truth out. She became breathing proof that the God of Israel was the God of the entire world. The blessings that flowed through her descendants showed just how far the ripples of one faithful choice can spread. Her choice to lean on the God of Israel changed more than her own path. It altered history for generations. One person's trust, her story suggests, carries a weight that reaches far beyond what we can ever see. Her path challenges our habit of deciding who deserves mercy. If God could place a prostitute from Jericho at the heart of his rescue plan, then nobody is too far gone for his love, and nobody is too broken to be used for his highest purposes. Her story continues to offer fresh hope to everyone who hears it. She points directly to a God who specializes in starting over, a God who loves to rescue and who knows exactly how to build something beautiful out of the most shattered lives. Ultimately, Rahab's path is much more than just one woman's wild journey. It is a window into the very heart of God. Her rescue points straight to the final rescue coming through her descendant, Jesus Christ. Her safety hints at the rescue waiting for everyone who dares to trust the God who knocks down walls and builds up faith. Rahab's impact has echoed across centuries. Her story has echoed through countless cultures and traditions, coming alive in new ways for every generation that meets her. Her tale, long ago, broke past its ancient boundaries to become a story that belongs to everyone, speaking across languages and geography, to people who have wrestled with their own questions about identity, belonging, and the hope of becoming someone new. In Jewish tradition, Rahab became the ultimate symbol of the honest convert, someone born an outsider who made a conscious choice to step inside. Ancient teachers wove stories about her beauty and wisdom, her impact on the men of her time, and her role in protecting the line of David.
Some traditions even claimed she eventually married Joshua, making her a far bigger character in the conquest than the Bible alone suggests. The Talmud records long debates about her past, with some scholars arguing she was merely an innkeeper rather than a prostitute, while others accepted the harsher truth directly. These debates pointed to deeper questions about who God chooses to use and how rescue works. Early Christian writers saw her as a powerful picture of real faith. Early church leaders like Clement of Rome and Augustine used her story to show that God's grace is open to everyone. Her place in the family tree of Christ became a major argument for welcoming non-Jewish believers into the early church. Medieval Christian art often painted her as a symbol of the church itself, a former pagan bride, claimed by love and brought close to God. In handwritten books and stained glass windows, she stood alongside other holy women. Artists painted her red cord as a clear sign of mercy. During the Protestant Reformation, her story gained new attention, as teachers argued that we are saved by faith alone. Her simple, raw trust in the God of Israel, proven when she sheltered those spies, showed exactly how faith works in the lives of ordinary people. She proved that neither a fancy background nor a perfect record is needed to find God's favor. In 19th century American writing, Rahab popped up constantly in novels and poems as a beautiful image of mercy and the chance to start over. Writers loved how her life echoed the deep belief that anyone can walk away from their past and build a brand new life. African American preachers and spirituals often pointed to Rahab to show how God lifts up the lowly and uses what the world discards for great things. Her journey hit home for people who knew exactly what it felt like to be ignored by the world, but picked by God. Modern thinkers see her as a woman of pure grit and action, far from some helpless bystander waiting for rescue. Instead, they focus on her quick wits and the high-stakes choices she made. She led her family, brokered a deal with foreign spies, and survived. Books and movies still try to capture her spirit. Every storyteller twists the lens a bit, but the heart of it, that messy, beautiful rescue, never really changes. It is a tale that still forces us to ask, who does God actually call clean? Down in Latin America, thinkers working with the poor see Rahab as proof that God stands with those pushed to the very edges of life. A woman on the brink, defying the local rulers, putting her life on the line for a foreign deity she barely knew it, is incredibly raw. That deep desperation speaks to anyone fighting for dignity and freedom, especially in places where family shame is a death sentence. Rahab's rise from the red light district to high honor shows what can actually happen. It proves God's grace dives beneath the heaviest social filth, offering a completely different way of measuring a human life. When people talk about refugees and borders today, they often bring up Rahab to show that outsiders can become family. The way Israel took her in remains a powerful template for towns ready to open their doors to anyone seeking a safe harbor. Her journey has also brought immense comfort to women trying to escape the commercial sex trade today. It carries a beautiful promise: no situation is ever too hopeless, and no past is too dark to be completely washed clean. In multi-faith circles, her story serves as a rare common ground. Muslims respect her as a devout woman who bowed to God, while Jewish traditions praise her as the ultimate convert. Christians see her as an early whisper of the gospel. Her life somehow speaks to three distinct faiths at once. Therapists and counselors who treat deep trauma find a lot of wisdom in her psychological survival. How she went from terror to trust, from total isolation to true community, and from shame to honor provides a beautiful blueprint for real recovery. Even universities study her from every possible angle: history, literature, and sociology. Scholars dissect the text and peer into ancient ruins,
but they all end up in the exact same spot. Her tale has a strange power to cross any human barrier. Even today, artists find themselves endlessly drawn to her journey. Painters and writers use her world to explore what it means to be an exile, to find a home, and to be brave when everything is burning down. It shows how a single terrified choice can echo down through thousands of years. Best of all, she gives real hope to people who think their own messy past has ruined any chance of a decent future. In a harsh world that has zero patience for anyone who has stumbled, her story insists that real transformation is absolutely possible, and starting over is always well within reach. The fact that we still talk about her shows our deep shared hunger for second chances to be loved despite our failures and to start completely fresh. Through every age, everyday people have looked at Rahab and seen a mirror of their own desperate hope to be made new, to be forgiven, and to step into a tomorrow that is not defined by yesterday. The sun sets over the ancient ruins of Jericho. Those walls are long gone, reduced to silent dust, but the tale born inside them is still very much alive, speaking to hurting hearts everywhere. Her incredible escape from the dark into a bright beginning is just as powerful today as it was 3,000 years ago. She forces us to rethink how we judge who is worthy. We live in a world that defines people solely by their worst moments, by where they come from or what they do. But Rahab tells a much softer, truer story. She shows us that grace plays by a completely different set of rules, seeing beautiful potential where the world only sees a lost cause. That bright red cord hanging from her window has wound its way down through human history. It remains a powerful lifeline for the desperate, a second chance for anyone who thought they were done, and a promise that God's love will find you in the dark. When we look at her rise from a shamed street outcast to an ancestor of kings, we are forced to look honestly at our own messy lives. What thick walls block our lives? What old mistakes keep us from seeing what is possible? What fears stop us from letting go and trusting a power bigger than our own? Rahab had that raw courage in the heavy moment those spies knocked. Her choice to trust Israel's God, knowing the lethal risks, still echoes today. Forget her dark past and the terrifying unknown. That kind of blind trust rewrites history. It shows us that real change always starts with one simple choice: to trust, to let hope get a foot in the door, and to believe. The warm welcome her family received in Israel answers that deep ache we all have, the ache to belong, moving from hated enemy to true sister. Going from an outsider to someone vital offers hope to anyone who has stood on the outside looking in, wondering if they would ever find a place inside. This story shows us that true community is not about where we come from, but what we believe. It is built on hope, not just a shared past. Her place in the family tree of King David and eventually Jesus Christ shows how small private choices can ripple outward through history. A desperate woman making a deal with 2 foreign spies could never have guessed her decision would alter the course of human history. She shows us that our decisions carry more weight than we think, and faith reaches far beyond what we can see. The spiritual depth of her life reveals new layers to every generation. She stands as proof of a God who makes his home in the middle of the impossible, a creator who loves choosing the unlikely, and who knows exactly how to build beauty out of a broken beginning. Her voice still echoes across centuries and different faiths, showing the raw power of her story. Whether through Jewish, Christian, or other perspectives, her life touches something deep in all of us. That universal ache for redemption, the longing to change, the quiet hope of starting fresh without the past holding you back. In a broken world, quick to judge, Rahab offers a different, more hopeful path.
She is a living reminder that nobody is out of reach of grace and that anyone has the power to change. She shows that the most unexpected people can become giants of faith. Her legacy is not just ink on a page, but a heartbeat in anyone who finds the courage to trust, the quiet courage to hope, and the willingness to believe that a messy past does not dictate a future. She is proof that with God, nothing is truly off the table. As we reach the end of this look into her life, it is hard not to marvel at how heaven works through fragile human choices. Rahab is not just some dusty character from ancient history. Her life is living proof that faith can reshape a person, rewrite a destiny, and bring a beautiful ending to a story that looked completely hopeless. The woman who once stood at her window, watching the armies of Israel march across the plain below, became part of the greatest story ever told. Her faith was woven into the very foundation of the kingdom of God. Her bravery became a spark that helped change everything. In the end, Rahab leaves us with an open invitation, a call to trust when trust seems completely foolish, to hope when there is no solid ground left to stand on, to believe when believing feels like a leap too far. She shows us that the God who shattered the walls of Jericho is still doing that exact work, tearing down walls, still writing stories of grace, and still offering a second chance to anyone willing to reach out and grab it. That scarlet cord, which started as a simple rope hanging from a window, now stands as a symbol of the bridge between heaven and earth, between human struggle and divine rescue, between the people we used to be and the people we can still become. In her journey we find our own, a simple human story of grace, given faith, offered back, and a deep change that only God could make happen. The woman who protected two strangers and saved a nation still speaks down through the centuries, reaching hearts with her quiet courage. Her legacy lives on, not just in her royal descendants, but in anyone who looks at her life and realizes that real change is possible, that redemption is right here, and that a fresh start is never quite as far away as we think.